Chapter 753. There was no doubt that Oldman's small town would be stirred up. This mine that the dwarves had operated for 100 years would actually be turned into a small underground city. It would have a complete water circulation system, indoor plantations, strong defenses, and comfortable houses. It would be the edge of the forest of chaos and one of the safest places to live. The dwarves publicly announced that Oldman's small town would be the edge of the forest of chaos, the safest and most prosperous market. The dwarves even welcomed the various clans to live here, making Oldman's small town their common home. All the powers that protected the small town would share the taxes and wealth of the small town according to their contributions. This incomparably novel management model was spread in the nearby temporary towns through the posting of notices everywhere. Within a few days, it had spread to the surrounding hundreds of kilometers. Everyone was dumbfounded by this method. Common management? Shared benefits? Long-term development? When did the dwarves become this naive? Could it be the dwarves didn't know that the forest was a group of people who ate alone? They never pursued a long-term plan, only daring to make a one-time deal. Everyone followed the cruel dark forest law, wishing they could hide in the darkness and not be discovered by hunters. However, the dwarves were like a group of people standing around a campfire shouting, "Quickly come over, I'm here." This kind of bold method would definitely bring disaster. The forest of chaos did not lack hunters and there was no lack of bandits that lived by plundering. Revealing their position was no different from seeking death. As for this ridiculous proposal, no one cared about it. But the surrounding villages were stirred up. After Sardo's small town collapsed, the several villages did not have a suitable place to trade. When they heard this news, they couldn't help coming over to take a look. When the several villages arrived at Oldman's small town, they were all stunned by the scene in front of them. There was a giant screen hanging at the entrance and the mirror-like screen was playing the situation of Oldman's small town. It introduced the location and characteristics of the small town's market, it introduced the benefits of doing business in Oldman's small town, and it also introduced the strategies for merchants coming to the small town to do business. This kind of new advertising method made everyone's eyes light up. But everyone quickly found that they were surprised too early because when they entered Oldman's small town, an even more shocking scene appeared in front of them. Without a doubt, this was an underground city. There were many underground cities in the forest of chaos. The underground cities were hidden, sealed, dark, and airtight. However, Oldman's small town completely subverted people's ideas. Not only was the air circulation very smooth, the most important thing was that the small town was brightly lit. There were giant electric lamps hanging high up, shining enough to light up the entire small town. The underground palace made by the dwarves was very grand, looking very dignified under the light. There were speakers placed on both sides to guide the guests. This is too mysterious. The rabbit village chief looked at the light with a face filled with amazement. What kind of light is this? It's not like a crystal lamp, so why is it this bright? When they entered the Oldman's small town market, they found that it was deserted and there were almost no people here, but the dwarves had already listed out some goods. Of course it came from miracle commerce. Other than high-quality pills and talismans. Other than that, there were some simple things like canned food, wine, electric lamps, cameras, and some rare materials in the forest. Chu Tian gave all the goods to the dwarves to sell, giving the dwarves a generous 50-50 split of the profits. These things were not high quality, but they were very fresh. It immediately attracted the attention of the people in the village and some people bought a batch of these things. As long as someone tried it, then it would be much easier. Oldman's small town's special goods were spread through the other black markets, small towns, and underground markets. In just a few days, there were more and more people coming to Oldman's small town. It was the same as before, most of them were people from small villages. The Oldman mine market did not just sell goods, it also bought all kinds of resources, demon beast meat, herbs, ores, and leather. As long as it was a common material, it would be bought and the price given was very fair. People became even crazier. The villages could more or less take out some of these things. If they were taken to other markets, they wouldn't even be sold for half the price in Oldman's small town. With a simple comparison, even a fool would make the right choice. The enticement of the Oldman small town's official market attracted a lot of people. In around a week, there were over 100 small villages and small tribes that came to the small town, becoming more and more popular. There were even people from far away who were prepared to make the long journey here to trade. From the moment Oldman's small town was opened until now, there were no hunters or bandits that came to loot it. People analyzed the reason and finally came up with a reasonable conclusion. First, there were 5,000 brave dwarves in the Oldman mines. Normal small-scale hunters and bandits did not dare take the risk. Second, the Oldman mines had already been looted once and the most valuable weapons and equipment had been taken away. Third, the Oldman mines had already been exposed and everyone knew about this place. What meaning was there in attacking it? Instead, it was possible that a large power would come looking for it. Fourth, the Oldman mines had begun to openly recruit allies. The goods that came from the market clearly did not come from the hands of the dwarves. This meant that there were other powerful powers involved in the Oldman mines and they did not dare enter without investigating it clearly. Like this, Oldman's small town danced on the tip of a knife, not attracting any unexpected calamity. Instead it made this small town famous. There was no large power openly protecting it, but no one dared to move against it. It was unknown when this delicate balance would be broken, but before it was broken, it was safe. There were large benefits here and no one would go against benefits. Now it was not just the small villages that came to Oldman's small town to trade, there were some small and medium-sized powers that couldn't sit still and sent people to participate. The small town was filled with a flourishing scene. The dwarves were very happy about this because after the small town's market was opened, not only would they receive a high percentage of Miracle Commerce's goods, they would also be able to get a bit of profit from other transactions. If this continued, the dwarves would quickly become rich. The dwarf chief came to find Chu Tian with a worried expression. Although the market is bustling, no one is willing to become our ally and defend Oldman with us. If this continues and the small town becomes more prosperous, it will eventually attract a disaster. When strength and wealth were not equal, it was the time of crisis. Once Oldman's small town quickly became prosperous, the small town's wealth would increase and there would be more and more resources. When it reached a certain level, it would attract people's greed. Don't be anxious, this is very normal. Chu Tian was very confident in the development of the situation. Oldman's small town has just been established and this kind of joint management system is a new concept in the forest. When something new appears, people will need more time to observe it. Moreover, because the small town has been opened, we will be in the eye of the storm. It is normal for other people to question our strength, so what we need now is a chance to display our strength. The Oldman small town's management system was indeed very advanced in the Forest of Chaos. Many powers jointly managed it and the small town's profits were shared. Whoever gave the small town more protection would obtain more taxes and benefits. He believed that some medium-sized and large-sized powers would be interested in this and send a part of their forces to the small town, forming a joint security force. Like this, the marauders would not dare act rashly. The dwarves were not afraid of losing control of the mines. After all, they were only sharing the market. The dwarves could still mine on the third floor and live as usual. At this time, the surrounding space began to fluctuate. Chu Tian, there's a situation. What happened? We've found a bit of information. Vivian anxiously said to Chu Tian, there is a large group of spirit insects moving in the west and they seem to be coming our way. I suspect they are Cannon's companions. How many are there? I'm not too clear, but there should be at least several tens of thousands. They're finally here. From the moment Oldman's small town was opened, the small town would inevitably be challenged. Chu Tian was already mentally prepared. As long as he became famous in the forest, there would be an endless stream of people coming to join him. The spirit insects are good at digging holes, we have to be on guard. Chu Tian first wrote a letter and placed it in the space warehouse to ask the young miss for help. After half a day, he opened the space warehouse again, but the letter had already been taken away and there were over 1,000 landmines in its place. Chu Tian understood the young Miss' meaning and immediately called Vivian over to have her bury the landmines. These landmines were buried around 10 kilometers away from the small town and around 10 meters underground. There were large amounts of tree roots on top, so it was not easy to trigger them on the surface. If something came from underground, it would be blown to pieces. In 2 days, the news of the spirit insects attacking Oldman's small town spread like wildfire. The small town that had become lively with great difficulty instantly became deserted. Each village tried their best to hide, avoiding being caught up in the battle. At the same time, they were paying close attention to the battle. Whether Oldman's small town was strong or weak, it would be decided in this battle. It wasn't just the small powers paying attention, even the large powers on the edge of the forest were paying close attention. When the battle was about to erupt, Chu Tian received the large amounts of source energy weapons from the space warehouse. The forest had already been covered by Miracle Commerce's signal. Chu Tian contacted Nangong Yun through the communication device and the 3,000 berserkers had already arrived at the Oldman mines. Chu Tian's heart instantly calmed down. Chapter 754. The lush leaves of the forest cut the sunlight to pieces. Several big-eared monsters were carrying herbs and ores on their backs, happily rushing towards Oldman town. The big-eared monsters were a common race in the forest. They had green skin like the orcs, were short, weak, and stupid, and mainly ate vegetarian food. Although they had very sharp hearing, they were naturally very timid, so they were the lowest-ranked race in the forest. They couldn't even compare to the low-level spirit beasts like the mouse and rabbit races, so they were always bullied by other races. This made the big-eared monsters not dare come into contact with other races, so they could only steal things like stealing things, stealing medicine fields, and etc. However, the big-eared monsters were very happy recently. This was already the 4th time they were on the road to Oldman's small town. In Oldman's small town's fair and safe trading environment, even a weak race like them would not be bullied by others. Now they could bravely take out their treasures to exchange for urgently needed items. What should they exchange for today? Canned food? Weapons? The big-eared monsters were arguing with each other as they walked. Who knew what sound their sharp hearing would catch at this time? When the big-eared monsters looked over to where the sound came from, they were instantly scared out of their wits. With a sharp cry, they turned to run. In Oldman's small town's canyon, there were beautiful and graceful snow-white unicorns that were currently surrounding Oldman's small town. These demon beasts were like white jade sculptures, their bodies were filled with a strong and explosive beauty. They were simply like works of art, truly worthy of being spirit beasts that often appeared in literature and poetry. Unicorns were high-level demon beasts with intelligence, so their strength could be seen on their horns. In a normal situation, a normal white horn was equivalent to a level 2 demon beast. If it had a silver horn, it would be equivalent to a level 3 demon beast. If it had a crystal clear light gold horn, it would be equivalent to a level 4 unicorn king. Around 3,000 white unicorns were neatly surrounding Oldman's small town. Their numbers were this large, it could be called a unicorn army. Other than that, there was an elf holding a bow sitting on the back of each unicorn. Pairs of eyes were staring at Oldman's small town like tigers watching their prey. Those big-eared monsters that were scared away. Not a single elf would care. When the elves came here, it was unknown how many gnomes, goblins, and Bigfoot monsters were scared away, but it also alarmed the ogres and high-level spirit beasts. But the scale of the unicorn army was too big. Even if they didn't run away in fear, they wouldn't dare do anything to the elves. Everyone was confused. In the edge of the forest of chaos, why would there be so many elves? The elves were one of the main powers in the forest of chaos and they didn't like dealing with other races. They would never attack other locals for no reason, so what was going on this time? Grandfather. A young elf around 14 or 15 years old, wearing green wooden armor and holding a thin spear, was asking an older elf for permission to fight. We've received accurate information. Little Princess Vivian has been kidnapped here. Let's kill our way in and rescue the little princess. This elderly elf didn't appear to be as old as his seniority. There weren't many wrinkles on his face, but his eyebrows and hair were grayish-white. His aura was steady and deep. Although he was riding on an ordinary unicorn, his temperament was especially outstanding among the many elves. The little princess was kidnapped. Who in this world could kidnap her? The elven great elder didn't need a brain to guess what had happened. The elves were not a race that liked fighting, so there was no need to kill. This small town was just a peripheral force. In the eyes of the elves, it couldn't cause any trouble. They might as well capture the little princess first and then properly investigate the matter. Greyheart, don't be reckless. The little princess is rebellious. Do you want her to run away again? The elven great elder knew Vivian's character very well. To deal with this little princess, he could only guide her slowly and not use violence. Therefore, he ordered, go to the small town in front and report. If you don't want innocent people to be hurt for no reason, then immediately send Princess Vivian out. The elves are a civilized race with a long history. If they can avoid using violence to solve problems, then they should. I believe that the kind little Princess Vivian also doesn't want to see innocent people hurt because of her. The elves immediately went to report. The elven youth Greyheart was a bit aggrieved. This is just a small tribe on the edge of the forest. We are noble and powerful elves, why should we be polite to these lowly forest races? Everything exists for a reason, we can't kill people just because they are lowly. The great elder seemed to accept that humans and spirit beasts were low-level races, just like ants and beetles. He proudly said, it is because we live among these lowly, ugly, and dirty races that the elves are more elegant and noble. So, we can't easily destroy the traditions of the elves, this is the biggest difference between us and the races of the continent. Greyheart's mouth fell open. Don't say any more. The great elder cut him off, we are only investigating the matter of Aubersen's immortal herb being stolen and Princess Vivian running away from the tribe. We won't involve anything unrelated. Vivian, Chu Tian, and Meng Yingying came out. This is bad. Vivian saw the elven elder sitting on the unicorn in the distance and her expression instantly changed, this is the Tree of Life tribe's great elder. Vivian had been staying in the Tree of Life tribe before she ran away. The Tree of Life tribe was not an important place for the elves, it couldn't even be considered an elven city. However, the location of this tribe was said to be the origin of the elves, the ancient ancestral land of the wood elves. So, although it was not flourishing or strong, according to the traditions of the elves, each elf needed to live in the ancestral land for a period of time, receiving teachings and learning the rules of the tribe. Once they reached adulthood, they would be sent to various tribes. This period of time was very important to each elf. Vivian was the Elven King's youngest daughter, but she actually ran away from the ancestral land and stole the tribe's elder's immortal medicine. This matter naturally caused a large stir, so it created a very bad influence in the elves. Greyheart revealed a look of joy when he saw Princess Vivian, the princess has left the tribe for 2 months and almost the entire elven race is looking for you. I think it must be a despicable human who tricked the princess, that's why something like this happened. As long as we heavily punish the lowly human, perhaps the princess' punishment will be reduced a bit. Don't speak nonsense. The matter of stealing the medicine was done by me, running away from home was also done by me. It was all my idea, it has nothing to do with anyone else. Vivian showed no fear or remorse, I am already a member of Miracle Commerce, I won't go back with you. Go back and tell Royal Father and the Council's old men that I have already grasped the technology to change the elves' fate. When I go back, I will be able to benefit the entire race. Greyheart's expression changed. The little princess had really been bewitched by the humans. Otherwise how could she say this kind of nonsense? Damn, these sly and hypocritical humans, they loved tricking the pure elves the most. The most unforgivable thing was that even the elven race's pearl, Princess Vivian, had been bewitched, adding to her crime. Vivian claimed to be a member of some company and was actually willing to work with humans. This was simply blasphemy against the elves and a large violation of the elven laws. No. This was already not just violating the elven laws. This was basically rebelling against the elven race. The elven great elder's face sunk. If this matter became big, Vivian would be imprisoned for at least 100 years. It was imprisonment, not house arrest. Even Vivian would not be able to escape from the elven imprisonment. This was a very severe punishment for the elves with long lifespans. Chu Tian saw that something was wrong and immediately stood up to say, "Fellow elven friends, you've misunderstood. Vivian took the medicine to save me, but regarding this matter, I have already." "Shut up. You're a traitor human." Greyheart's wooden spear stabbed into the ground and Chu Tian felt countless vines come out from his body, wrapping around him like giant pythons. Greyheart's figure moved and he stabbed out with his spear like a meteor. Greyheart looked like a 13 to 14-year-old boy, but in human terms, he would be over 60 years old. He was only 1 year younger than Vivian. The elf's mental growth was quite slow, but elves at this age weren't weak at all. Not to mention the grandson of the Greyheart tribe's great elder, his cultivation had reached the first true spirit layer. Vivian wanted to stop him when she saw this. She was very familiar with Greyheart's methods and with her strength and innate spatial energy, it was very easy for her to subdue Greyheart. But before Vivian could make a move, the elven great elder's talisman fell onto Vivian and instantly sealed Vivian's source spirit. This is bad. She couldn't use her spatial energy. Greyheart's spear stabbed at Chu Tian. Chu Tian's face sunk. Damn, this group of pedantic and stupid elves, they clearly picked up a large bargain, but they still want to kill father? But, if father died here this easily, then he would have lived 2 lives in vain. The demon god's sword source spirit soared into the sky. That destructive might that looked down on all living beings instantly tore apart the vines binding him. Chu Tian directly activated the second state of the flame demon transformation and with the endless might of the demon god's sword, he slashed at Greyheart. 8th awakened soul layer against the first true spirit layer. There was no suspense at all. Chu Tian's flame demon transformation could increase his strength by 1 layer at most, but the demon god's sword source spirit's amplification could allow him to kill a peak 9th true spirit layer expert. Even if he faced a first true spirit layer cultivator, he wouldn't lose. Dong! The 2 powers collided. Both sides were sent flying back at the same time. Chu Tian was at a slight disadvantage, but Greyheart's wooden spear had already been ignited by the netherworld ghost flame. Such an evil power. Greyheart was secretly shocked. Princess Vivian, with your noble status and bloodline, how can you be together with these lowly races who are famous for their hypocrisy and despicableness? Moreover, they are people who practice evil arts and have evil intentions. I think he wants to use your status to deal with the elves. This accusation was becoming bigger and bigger. Chu Tian felt that he should just change his name to Black Pot Chu. Chapter 755. The Spider Marquis Elvis was filled with rage. This was because his younger brother, the Spider Count Cannon, had been killed by a group of lowly dwarves. They were all descendants of the Spider Queen Alexis. Alexis was one of the oldest spirit insects in the Forest of Chaos and her descendants were spread throughout the Forest of Chaos. Although they had their own influences, Cannon was Elvis's younger brother from the same father, so they had a close relationship. These damn dwarves actually dared to kill his younger brother, this was simply a provocation to Queen Alexis. Exterminate them. Suck their blood dry. Kill all of them. Elvis found the last 2 brothers with the title of Count and gathered the spider people on the edge of the forest. There was a total of 60,000 people, 10 times the number of dwarves. With these 3 powerful spider nobles leading the way, the trivial several thousand dwarves were just small fish and meat waiting to be sacrificed on the altar. The spider army charged into the valley where Oldman's small town was. The dwarves' mines are in front of us, should we directly attack them? They were only 20-30 kilometers from Oldman's small town. With the spider army's speed, they could charge in and attack in one breath. The dwarves' minds are very strong. Send 30,000 people to dig into the ground and the other 30,000 people will attack from the outside with me. Immediately move. Elvis passed down his orders. The spider people began to dig into the ground. The spider people had special bodies and cultivated earth-attributed cultivation techniques, so they could easily dig into the ground and even move through the ground. Attack! Seeing that half of the army had entered the ground, Elvis did not plan on scouting because it was just a trivial 5,000 dwarves, there was nothing to scout. They would just charge forward and tear them to pieces. However, just as Elvis gave his order, a girl's figure appeared in front of the spider army. This girl was wearing tree clothes and a flower crown. Her feet were bare, and she was petite and beautiful. She stood in front of the spider army, blocking their path. Elf? Where did this elf come from? Elvis stood in front of the army. When he saw the elf suddenly appear, he was a bit stunned before angrily shouting, "Who are you?" Vivian was too lazy to bother with him as she walked step by step towards the tens of thousands of spider army. Her steps seemed slow, but they were actually very fast. In just a short while, she appeared in front of the spider army. This made the spider people go into an uproar, they didn't know what this elf was planning. Kill! Elvis didn't care. Since you dare block our path, then you can die here. A wave of poison arrows that were enough to turn a petite body into a hedgehog flew over. Who would have thought that Vivian would be completely unafraid and even indifferent? She didn't defend herself at all as she continued to advance towards the spider army. What was going on? Was there something wrong with this elf's head? Several dozen poison arrows flew over and when the beautiful elf was about to be turned into a hedgehog, a surprising scene occurred. The arrows pierced through Vivian's body, but they didn't pierce through her body, rather they passed through without any resistance, stabbing into a large rock behind her. They didn't hit her. Impossible. Could it be an illusion, or a ghost? That's not right, this was clearly a living person. Trying to be mysterious. Elvis pulled out a spear and personally shot it out. This spear was filled with spirit energy, but the result was the same as before. The spear landed on Vivian's body without any resistance, directly piercing through Vivian's body. Hong! The spear struck the boulder like a bolt of lightning, instantly crushing the boulder into powder. What kind of monster are you? Elvis's face turned livid and the other spider people went into an uproar because Vivian was already less than 20 meters away. She raised her hand and slashed at Elvis. Elder Weiss instantly sensed the fluctuation of space, a space attack. No matter how strong one's defense was, it was useless against space. As long as the attacker could overcome the spatial resistance created by the objects in the space, this attack would ignore any defense. So, once a spatial attack formed, any kind of resistance would be meaningless. Elder Weiss reflexively pulled back and dodged, but a spatial slash slashed at his left shoulder. As a result, one of his arms was directly cut off. Damn! Kill him! Countless spider people were instantly stirred up and all kinds of attacks rained down. Vivian completely ignored these attacks, allowing the dense barrage of attacks to pass through her body. She charged into the spider army like a ghost and those arrows passed through Vivian's body, hitting the other spider soldiers, causing quite a bit of damage to their own people. Another spatial slash was sent out. Ah! The spider count gave a pitiful cry as it was cut in half. Elvis angrily shouted, "Don't let her lock onto you." The spider army was filled with fear. This elf with innate spatial energy could kill any one of them with a raise of her hand, so why were their attacks useless against this elf? Elvis could not explain everything, he could only summon his source spirit to release spirit energy around him. The higher the energy or mass in space, the more energy it would take to use spatial attacks, so he could only use this method now. Vivian sent out 4-5 spatial slashes in a row. Elvis covered his body with strong spirit energy. Although he could not resist spatial attacks with his strength, it was a bit strenuous for Vivian to use spatial energy. So, the spatial slashes were not fast enough and Elvis dodged them each time. She didn't have much spirit energy left. Vivian knit her brows. She gave up on Elvis and immediately raised her hands. The spatial dagger source spirit appeared above her head and she aimed at another spider count. Random spatial slashes. The spider count also released his spirit energy to stop the spatial attacks, but his strength was much lower than Elvis's, so Vivian could quickly finish her attacks. She instantly sent out 7-8 spatial slashes that he could not dodge at all. No! Elvis's eyes filled with rage. The last little brother had been cut to pieces. Vivian was a bit tired and her spirit energy was almost out. If the void escaping effect disappeared, she would be in great danger. Since she had already done enough, she would leave the rest to everyone else. She cut open a spatial rift and left. The entire attack lasted for less than 2 minutes. The mysterious elf was like a ghost that appeared in the middle of the army of tens of thousands. She ignored the dense and wild attacks and cut off one of Elvis's arms. She also killed 2 spider counts that were not weak and then swaggered away. Not a single hair was harmed in the entire process. The spider army felt their hairs stand on end. Hung, hung, hung. At this time, there were several explosions in the direction of Oldman's small town that caused the ground to shake like an earthquake. It was clear that the landmines had been triggered. The landmines made the drilling spider soldiers dizzy. They had no choice but to crawl out of the ground in a sorry state, and there were quite a few of them that were injured. There are many traps in the ground, we can't pass through them. Ah, ah, ah. Elvis angrily raised his spear. Kill, kill, kill. Attack the dwarves' mines. I want to tear these damn things into 10,000 pieces. When the spider army was prepared to gather, large amounts of round objects fell from both sides of the canyon. When these ordinary things fell into the middle of the spider army, they immediately exploded. It was a large pile of source energy grenades. Nangong Yun picked up a storm rifle and led several thousand barbarians, coming out from both sides of the canyon. She looked down at the spider people in the canyon, annihilate them. There were over 100 storm rifles, several dozen source energy cannons, 4 source energy cannons, and everyone else had at least a source energy submachine gun. The moment Nangong Yun gave the order, the wild storm of energy bullets covered the canyon like a curtain of light. The dense firepower of the source energy firearms and the source energy cannons exploded several times, directly evaporating several dozen spider people. The source energy cannons continued to fire, targeting areas where there were many people, instantly causing heavy casualties. The spider army began to wildly scatter because this was no longer a battle, but rather a bloody massacre. With this kind of intense and dense attack, they had no way of fighting back. Activate the Berserk transformation. Nangong Yun saw that the bullets were almost used up and immediately used the loudspeaker to loudly order, "This is your chance to gain merit. Let them see the might of a berserker." Roar, roar, roar. The 3,000 barbarians let out inhuman roars of rage. They put down the burning guns in their hands and their bodies turned red. Their meridians were like centipedes twisting under their skin and their eyes could no longer be seen, only leaving behind a wild scarlet color. Kill. The 3,000 barbarians held the incomparably heavy profound iron weapons and jumped down from both sides of the canyon. There was no formation or tactics, they were like meteors falling from the sky. They only had one goal in their minds: kill the enemy and gain merit. The barbarian berserker swung his battle axe at a spider race soldier. That terrifying strength shattered the other side's armor and weapon, instantly collapsing a large part of the mountain. That spider race soldier had already turned into a pile of bones, flesh, organs, and armor that had been crushed into a ball. There was no fancy cultivation technique, it was pure strength, a strength that was not decorated at all. The barbarian berserkers released their strength to the limit. As long as the spider race soldiers were swept by their weapons, even if it was just a little bit, they would be smashed to pieces. The barbarian berserkers' thick profound iron armor was hard for the spider race soldiers to break. Moreover, they had lost their sense of pain and fear, only having rage and killing intent left. They were simply a group of human meat grinders that could not be stopped. Although there weren't many berserkers, their battle strength was overwhelming. The spider race army was considered a peak elite army in the kingdom, but in front of the berserkers, they were like paper, not having any ability to resist at all. Kill! The Oldman small town gates were pushed open and 5,000 dwarves charged out. They were completely stunned by the scene in front of them. The entire valley was filled with blood and there were broken corpses all over the ground. There was not a single complete body to be found. Several thousand soldiers covered in blood and other sticky substances slowly walked out, just like demons crawling out of hell. The dwarves were completely stunned. Chapter 756. Could the elves be as unreasonable as you all? These elves were making a move in front of Oldman's small town. What would the people of the small town think? Ying was too weak and couldn't help, so she could only angrily curse, "You're blaming good people based on assumptions. I thought the elves were a civilized and friendly race, but you're no different from the ogres and orcs." The elves' faces all changed. The elves had always been the most noble, elegant, beautiful, and civilized race on the continent, but now there were people comparing them to the ogres and orcs. This was a direct blow to the elves' pride. Mang Yingying loudly shouted, "You can kill me, I can't beat you, but I still have to say that I was wrong about you." This human didn't seem old. She was also a beautiful and innocent girl. The elves had the habit of judging people by their appearance. They believed that only those with a beautiful heart could have a beautiful appearance. It was because the elves had pure hearts that each elf looked pure and beautiful. Therefore, when he saw Mang Yingying, his first impression of her wasn't bad. He couldn't kill her just because of a few words, otherwise he wouldn't be any different from the orcs and spirit beasts. Yingying is right. Vivian was also filled with rage. "I used to think the elves were the friendliest race, but now I feel like I'm losing face. Wanting to kill someone without understanding the situation, is this the style of our elves?" The great elder's face was dark and clear, but he finally waved his hand. The elf put away his bow and he rode his unicorn forward. "This brave and beautiful young miss is right, the elves are a just and kind race. Greyheart, you're too impulsive." Greyheart was anxious to absolve Vivian. After all, Princess Vivian was still so young, he couldn't ruin her entire future just because of this small matter. Weren't humans hypocritical? This was definitely the fault of the humans. The great elder slightly pointed at Chu Tian. "Since it's like this, we'll ask Princess Vivian and you to return to the tribe and let the elves investigate this matter." Meng Yingying was not convinced. If Chu Tian goes to the elves, isn't he just a fish on your chopping board? What right do the elves have to judge humans? The elves have strict rules and laws. The elven great elder meticulously said, "We will judge this matter based on facts and reason, we will not frame an innocent person for no reason. Yingying, you go back. There's no harm in me making a trip." Chu Tian was very clear in his heart. If he didn't solve this matter, it would always be a problem hanging over his head. The elves were a large race and even after tens of thousands of years, in a world dominated by humans, the elves still had a lot of weight. Chu Tian knew that this was a race that stuck to rules and he knew how to deal with them. The only thing he was worried about was whether Oldman's small town would be affected by this. Chu Tian's mind quickly turned and he said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Elven elder, I am willing to go to the elven court to prove my innocence. But since the elves boast of being fair and righteous, before the elven court pronounces a verdict, I cannot be sure if I am a criminal or not. Since I haven't been convicted, shouldn't the elves respect my legal rights?" The elven elder was a bit stunned. "It should be like this. Now that the elves have invaded my property, I hope that the elves can make up for it." Greyheart angrily said, "Nonsense. This small town was built with quite a bit of effort. If the elves take me away, the small town will fall into chaos and innocent people will bleed. My property will also suffer because of this." Chu Tian clearly said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "This is the result of the elves' carelessness. We are not enemies, so the elves should not destroy other people's homes. At least before the verdict, the elves have the duty to protect the small town. The elven Great Elder was a bit surprised. The locals of the Forest of Chaos were all rude people, there was no one that followed the elves' laws. This human was speaking in such a confident manner, so the elves were not angry at all. Rather they felt that he was respecting the elves' strict and principled laws. Alright, this small town has not offended the elves, so it shouldn't be implicated. The elven Great Elder waved his hand. 1,000 people will be stationed here to maintain the peace of the small town until the verdict is announced. The 1,000 unicorn-riding elves were left in Oldman's small town. As long as the small town didn't collapse, their efforts during this time would not be in vain. Chu Tian said to Yingying, "This is a special time, you must maintain the stability of the small town. Also, inform the young miss and have her come as soon as possible to take charge." Alright. Meng Yingying saw that the elves were not an unreasonable race and her heart was a bit more assured. Then you have to be careful. Chu Tian revealed a disdainful smile. What was there to be afraid of with these pedantic fellows? Not to mention that Chu Tian did not do anything wrong. Instead the elves had taken advantage of him. I will come back in one piece. Yingying, be assured. Vivian said with an apologetic expression, I will prove Big Brother's innocence. Chu Tian rode the unicorn and left with the other elves. The Tree of Life tribe was very far away. Vivian didn't feel it with her spatial abilities, but riding the unicorn made it very clear. Even with the nimbleness of the unicorns, it would take a few days and nights to reach the Tree of Life tribe. The Tree of Life tribe was said to be the ancestral land of the Wood Elves and could be traced back to the Great Ancient Era. In the legends, the ancient Tree of Life was over 1,000 feet tall and could cover several miles. It grew in the Great Ancient Era and could be considered a spiritual god. It was this mysterious ancient tree that gave birth to the ancestors of the Wood Elves. Of course, the ancient Tree of Life no longer existed. It was said that when the Great Ancient Era collapsed, the ancient Tree of Life was torn apart, leaving behind a complete elven race. Because of this, the elves were one of the oldest races on the continent. However, because the elves had such a long history, this long history became the burden of the elves. All kinds of complicated rituals and ceremonies filled the elves' lives and all kinds of pedantic ideas filled the elves' minds. The elves had a long lifespan and a low birth rate, as well as rich emotions, which made them tired of war. They loved music, painting, carving, and poetry, pursuing a high quality of life, so they stood aloof from worldly affairs. Moreover, they rejected foreign cultures, not coming in contact with other large races. The elves were beaten back by the spirit beasts and the rise of the humans. This was an inevitable development of history. However, the elves did not see this point. The elves were still one of the strongest powers on the continent and there were elven tribes scattered all over the continent. They still thought that the elves were the strongest, most elegant, most beautiful, and most noble race on the continent. The Tree of Life tribe in the Forest of Chaos was only the elves' ancestral land. Some talented elves or important elves would be sent here when they reached adulthood to bathe in the moon spring and receive the teachings of their ancestors. In the end, they all had to leave. The ancestral land was protected by a large array that could not be broken and was very safe. However, there were no regular elven armies stationed here because there were many other tribes around the Tree of Life tribe. They were all allies of the elves in the forest and there was a tribe that had been allies with the elves for generations. With the protection of these tribes, the Tree of Life tribe did not need any soldiers at all. When Chu Tian was on the way to the Tree of Life tribe, he saw these strange races. These guys looked like tall trees. Most of the time, they were in deep sleep. Occasionally, one or two of them would be awake. They could transform into human bodies and could even walk normally like humans. There was no doubt that these were the Treants. The Treant clan was also an ancient and mysterious clan. It said that after the Tree of Life was destroyed, the Treants grew from roots that were buried deep underground. In a sense, the Treants had a deep relationship with the elves. The Traiants had a very long lifespan, and it's said that most of them could live for over 10,000 years. After a long period of time, each old Traiant was filled with wisdom. Of course, this ancient wisdom had its limits. It was not like the human race's wisdom that could be passed down from generation to generation. Each great sage stood on the shoulders of countless great sages, and all the knowledge and wisdom could be passed down from generation to generation. The Traiants had 10,000 years of wisdom, but it was still limited to their own comprehension. The two could not be compared. Little Princess Vivian is back. The elven tribe was in an uproar. Countless elven children were like nimble monkeys as they came out from all directions. They were all standing on the branches of the trees, and each of them had pure eyes as they looked at the returning unicorns. The matter of Vivian was very big. She had now become the villain of the elven tribe. These elven children were very shocked. This Princess Vivian, who played with them every day, had this much courage. She dared to escape the tribe. That was a great crime. Who is that person? Why does he look a bit familiar? Isn't that Chu Tian? The elves were in an uproar. They immediately recognized the human riding the unicorn that followed the elves back. It was the human swordsman they saw in the movies, the brave and righteous Chu Tian. Chu Tian, is it really you? I never thought I would really see you. Chu Tian, can you speak the elven language? These elven children did not understand the situation at all, so they all ran over to greet Chu Tian. There were even a few fellows that jumped onto the unicorn Chu Tian was sitting on. Chu Tian used the fluent elven language to greet them. Hello everyone. Wah! The elven children were all stunned. Your elven language is really good. I thought humans didn't understand the elven language. Chu Tian never thought that there would be this many little worshippers in this place. Chapter 757. The dwarves were standing in front of Oldman's small town's gates. Their faces were filled with respect and awe, welcoming their victorious king. Dong, 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 dong. Their heavy footsteps were messy, but they were filled with a sense of strength. The armor covered in blood was filled with a bloody aura, and the weapons covered in a red and white substance were covered in thick killing intent, as if the souls they took with them were still lingering around them. The dwarves swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Terrifying, too terrifying. If they didn't personally see it, they wouldn't dare believe it. An army of 3,000 could kill an enemy several times their number, and the spider army did not have any ability to resist under their terrifying firepower. Reporting to boss. Nangong Yun came over and said, "We didn't disappoint the mission and killed the enemy. Our army suffered over 100 casualties and over 30 of our brave warriors died." Only 30 died? The dwarves were stunned by this number. It's been hard on you. Chu Tian announced, the families of each warrior that died will receive a permanent subsidy from Miracle Commerce and will receive 10 times the compensation according to the kingdom's standard. The other warriors performed very well in this battle, so they will all be greatly rewarded. The berserkers' eyes turned hot. The barbarians were a low-status bandit race, but now they had become Miracle Commerce's honored berserkers. This was a large change in their fate, and Miracle Commerce's benefits were very generous. Not only did they train them to be berserkers, they were also given a very high soldier's treatment, and their families would take care of them. This allowed the berserkers to have no worries. Bring out the wine and meat. Let our warriors drink to their heart's content. When the berserkers heard this, they all excitedly roared out. Actually, after this battle, the berserkers were already very hungry, so having a meal now was perfect. Meng Qingguo had already made arrangements and transported a large amount of high-quality food from the space warehouse. These barbarian berserkers didn't even take off their armor and directly began to eat and drink. That fierce and wild appearance made the dwarves feel inferior. The berserkers could clearly feel that after this bloody battle and eating, their strength was much stronger than before. The injuries they had received in the battle were completely healed in less than 2 hours. They all felt full of energy, and their fighting spirit soared into the sky, wishing they could immediately fight again. This was the specialty of the berserkers. This was an army that became stronger the more they fought and braver the more they fought. During the training of the berserkers, they didn't need to use precious treasures, they just needed to eat and drink well. They could extract vitality from high-level demon beast meat and continuously increase their strength through bloody battles. Normal injuries could be quickly healed and their strength seemed endless. As long as they had enough food, they could fight for 10 days and 10 nights without rest. Once the berserkers entered the berserk state, with an axe or hammer, even an awakened soul cultivator would be smashed to death. If they were equipped with Miracle Commerce's source energy weapons, they would simply be invincible. The only fly in the ointment was that the berserkers were too violent. This caused the battlefield after the battle to be like several tens of thousands of tomatoes being crushed. It was hard to find a complete corpse and they were all a mixture of armor and flesh. So, it was very difficult to determine if the important targets had been killed or not. Going against humanity. Going against humanity. Chu Tian was too lazy to care about this. He ordered Dongfang Haoran, burn them all. After Dongfang Haoran experienced the strength of the berserker army, he was filled with admiration for Chu Tian. If Chu Tian had appeared in the southern summer country 5 years earlier, no, 2 years earlier, or even a year earlier, would the southern summer country have fallen to this point? Yes. Dongfang Haoran led people to clean up the battlefield. Large amounts of corpses were piled up into several small mountains. Finally at dusk, a fire was lit and they were instantly turned to ashes. Black smoke slowly filled the forest. This was the smell of death. The nearby races were all looking in the direction of Oldman's small town. When they saw the black smoke rising, they knew that the battle was already over. Oldman's small town was holding an important meeting. There was a large round table filled with people. Half of them were humans, half of them were dwarves, and there was even an elf who was currently discussing something. Finally the dwarf chief stood up. After our dwarven elders' evaluation and discussion, we have allowed the berserker army to be stationed in the small town, becoming the protectors of Oldman's small town. Their battle strength is over 75% of the small town's battle strength, so Mr. Chu Tian has at least 75% of the small town's ownership. The other dwarves nodded to each other. This was a conclusion that everyone was satisfied with. Actually the barbarian berserker army was over 75% of the small town's battle strength? Perhaps it was over 90%. Only Chu Tian and his team were willing to deliberately underestimate them, leaving the dwarves a bit of face and giving the dwarves a bit of benefits. Mr. Chu Tian's army is the strongest protector of the small town and you have obtained the most ownership of the small town, as well as the approval of the dwarven elders. According to Oldman's small town's new management plan, you will automatically become the mayor of Oldman's small town. Moreover, the more prosperous Oldman's small town was, the more the mine would increase in value. 40% of the area was in the hands of the dwarves and the dwarves could use this area to earn large amounts of profit. Chu Tian was the mayor. Since he was the mayor, of course he had to do something. Chu Tian directly proposed to the dwarves, we need to find more reliable partners. The more allies we have, the faster Oldman's small town's development will be and our position will become more stable. Chu Tian had already thought it through. In a place like the Forest of Chaos, Miracle Commerce couldn't do it alone. If Miracle Commerce wanted to quickly gather their strength and expand their influence, they had to distribute the benefits to more people and gain more allies for themselves. This way, they could quickly open up more channels for their company. The result of this battle caused a large stir in the forest. Oldman's small town's fame spread across the edge of the Forest of Chaos. Now everyone understood why Oldman's small town dared to be this arrogant, publicly going against the Dark Forest laws. According to Oldman's small town's current display of strength, perhaps they had already reached the level of a large power on the edge of the Forest of Chaos. This level of power was basically the overlord of the area. As long as they didn't attract any large characters from the depths of the forest, it wouldn't matter if they were exposed because the surrounding powers couldn't pose a threat. Even if they could pose a threat, they wouldn't risk both sides to fight this kind of meaningless battle. At this time, Oldman's small town announced a recruitment plan. They would take out around 30% of their land to give to their allies. The Oldman's small town's mayor was very bold and actually took the initiative to invite other powers to join them, working together to manage Oldman's small town. If it was before, this would have been a very risky move. In the forest of chaos, a person's heart was hard to predict. Who knew if others would use the name of joining to stab you in the back? But it was different now. In the 2 battles with the spider race, Oldman's small town had already displayed its strength. The dwarves must have found a strong ally. Chapter 758. Chu Tian had always looked down on the elves from the bottom of his heart. They were an outstanding race that did not lose to humans, had a long lifespan, and had a long history, but in the end they were bullied by the spirit beasts. Why? It was because the elves lacked the awareness of danger in times of peace. It was because the elves had put too many shackles on themselves. It was because the elves were civilized, elegant, and righteous. The elves rarely took the initiative to attack and they rarely used tricks in battle. Their armies were slow to form and they were slow to dispatch troops. Most of the battles were passive and there were several opportunities to destroy their enemies, but the elves let them go. This was not kindness, but stupidity. The elves always had an 80 to 90% chance of winning against the spirit beasts, but if the elves lost a main force, they wouldn't be able to recover even after several hundred years. If the spirit beasts lost a main force, they would be able to form a second one in around 10 years. How could the elves not weaken like this? But putting aside the race, just from the elves themselves, Chu Tian was quite fond of them. On this aspect, the elves were rich in beauties and it was hard to find an ugly person in the entire race. On the other hand, the elves were simple-minded, almost all of them had personalities like Mang Yingying. Chu Tian never would have thought that he would become a little star in the tribe. It was said that in the Tree of Life tribe, there were at least 300 little elves that recognized him and most of the other little elves had heard of Chu Tian's name. Because of this, when Chu Tian was detained, he received elven green tea and all kinds of fruits and snacks. Chu Tian, your story is truly shocking. Are you really a swordsman? A young elf girl asked with her big, innocent eyes. Are you really a swordsman? I think you're different from the movies. Of course. Chu Tian leaned against the treehouse in a comfortable position, with one hand as a pillow and the other gnawing on a fruit. There was also a large pile of food around him, and a dozen curious little faces were squeezed together outside the small window. These bumpkins, have they never seen a living person before? This was the first time he had seen a living human. This little fox is very cute. Is it your pet? That's right. Chu Tian's belongings were all confiscated and only after the elves examined him, the little fox that was confirmed to be harmless was left by Chu Tian's side, being placed under house arrest with Chu Tian. At this moment, the little fox was in the same position as him, eating a fruit that was around the size of its body. This matter had become this big. It was hard to predict whether they would live or die, but they were still this bold. The elves had long lives and because of their long lives, they loved life even more. In simpler terms, they were afraid of death, so they were very surprised by Chu Tian's indifferent attitude. Yesterday the elven tribe held a hearing and the elders listed many of your crimes. Are you not afraid at all? Chu Tian picked his ear and lazily said, What crimes? Tell me about it. The first crime is tricking an underage elven girl. The second crime is ordering the theft of the tribe's important resources. The third crime is using the elves to participate in the slaughter, making the elves and the spirit insects enemies. The fourth crime is... Chu Tian impatiently waved his hand. In short, just put the blame on father. You don't need to say anything else, I'm innocent anyways. Killing me won't change this fact. You're not afraid of death. What is there to be afraid of? Chu Tian fearlessly said, Even if you kill me, Chu Tian, there will be thousands of Chu Tians. But this is an unfair trial. Chu Tian will resist to the end. I would rather die than submit. The little elf's mind trembled. Chu Tian was an unyielding warrior in the movies, but at this moment, it was like the real Chu Tian had overlapped with the movie. This was the Chu Tian they worshipped. How could this kind of person be a bad person with evil intentions? Chu Tian gave a compassionate sigh. It's a pity that my grand dreams and revenge can't be realized. The little elves were filled with sympathy. The current Chu Tian was like a dreamer with unfulfilled ambitions, so they quickly asked, "What dreams do you have?" "Actually, my dreams are very simple," Chu Tian said in a serious voice. "I want to use my hands and wisdom to let the people of the continent live a good life. I also want to bring Yingying and the young miss through the plains and into the abyss, exploring the ultimate mysteries of the world." The elves all stared at him with wide eyes. Was this true? One of the elves couldn't help asking, "Does Meng Yingying really exist?" Of course. Not only does Yingying exist, she has also become good friends with Princess Vivian. Although the elves were a pedantic race, they were naturally kind, but this quality was not that good. This was because it was easier for a race to survive if they were a bit more cunning. The elves all cried out in surprise. Princess Vivian had become friends with Princess Meng Yingying. No wonder Vivian wanted to secretly escape from the tribe. It turned out that he was going to find these two people. These little elves were not that old, and compared to the adult elves, they were still very curious, but they were not as courageous as Vivian. Chu Tian said to these little elves, "Actually, I can let you meet her. Her personality is suitable to be friends with elves. However, I'm about to die and the elves do not allow elves to be friends with humans. It's a pity, it's a pity." The little elves had looks of melancholy and regret. Chu Tian was drinking the elven green tea while talking to the little elves. His knowledge from 30,000 years ahead was not something the elves could imagine, so he immediately coaxed these little fellows into a daze. Everyone was fascinated listening to him. "What are you doing here?" A voice rang out, "Why aren't you moving out of the way?" The little elves were shocked and they all scattered. What was going on? Chu Tian sat up straight. A well-developed female elf walked over. She looked like a 30-year-old human, but according to the elf's age, she was at least 160 to 70 years old. This elf's cold temperament was similar to Chen Bingyu's, but elves were still elves and their minds were pure. They were the same on this point. Aeldis, the Tree of Life tribe's second elder, she was mainly in charge of punishment. Chu Tian was sent to the Elven tribe for trial, so of course he had to go through her. The Elven trial court is almost ready and the Elven council is sending people to the tribe. Aeldis coldly looked at the locked-up Chu Tian. "Are you prepared to accept the Elven trial? Although the elves do not support the death penalty, the facts are clear and you will most likely be executed." "Trying to scare me? I won't fall for that. If he fell into the hands of another race, his future would be uncertain." Only the elves, Chu Tian was not afraid at all. According to the efficiency of the race, even if Chu Tian was executed, it would be a year and a half later. If he couldn't turn around or escape in that time, then he might as well commit suicide. Chu Tian said with an expressionless face, "Everyone has to die, but if my death can drag the entire elven race down with me, then my death will be worth it." Aeldis disdainfully said, "What makes you say that? I might be unknown right now, but my name will spread across the continent. At that time, the entire human race and even the continent will know that there is a human genius called Chu Tian, and this genius was killed by a group of hypocritical elves." Chu Tian said without any modesty, "At that time, not only will the elves' reputation be damaged, the humans will also have an excuse to fight the elves. I've never seen such a shameless person before." Aeldis gave a snort. "The rumors aren't wrong. Humans are all sly, treacherous, and hypocritical people." "That's where you're wrong. Anything is possible." Chu Tian changed the topic. "How about we make a bet? I can see that you've lived for around 200 years, so you should be quite knowledgeable. If I can win against you, how about you let me out?" Aeldis gave a cold laugh. "Then what if you lose?" Chu Tian replied, "If I lose, you can ask me to do anything, as long as it doesn't go against my principles." "Any one thing?" Any one thing. Do you have that kind of ability? Although there are many things in this world that I can't do, if you can think of something, I think most of it shouldn't be a problem. Then if I want the stars in the sky, can you pick them for me? Chu Tian thought for a few minutes. I can. Madman. Aildis felt that this fellow was a madman. She turned to leave. Chu Tian saw that she was about to leave and immediately called out, wait, if you win, you'll let me out. But no matter if I win or lose, I can help you with one thing. Are you satisfied like this? Was there something wrong with this person? Aildis didn't even think about it before leaving. Hey, don't go, I'm serious. Chu Tian watched her leave and could only curse in his heart, stupid, this kind of condition, I don't casually give it to others. If you don't take advantage of it, you'll regret it in the future. Chu Tian was locked in the little treehouse, helplessly stretching. With the elf's efficiency, he would have to stay here for a while. At this time, a soft voice suddenly entered his ears. Can you really pick the stars in the sky? Who? Who's talking? Chu Tian carefully looked around and locked onto a small creature. He was suddenly stunned. This thing, could it be the legendary flower fairies? There was a little thing that was the size of a finger that was standing by the window. This creature was very special. It looked exactly the same as an elf, but other than being very small, it also had a pair of small wings. These wings were as thin as a cicada's and they were shaped like butterflies. They were crystal clear and transparent, looking very beautiful. Chu Tian had seen this race in the ancient books. These little fellows were flower fairies and belonged to a branch of the elves. They were also called flower fairies. Don't look at their small size, this race was actually not weak. Chapter 759. Not only was Oldman's small town openly recruiting partners, they were also recruiting warriors in the small towns within several hundred kilometers. If recruiting partners was said to be roping in factions into an alliance, then recruiting warriors with super high treatment was the same as roping in wandering people. The experts living in seclusion in the Forest of Chaos could not be underestimated. There were many people who had come to the Forest of Chaos to escape disasters or to seek revenge. There were also some experts who had their tribes destroyed and their homes destroyed. They relied on their strength to survive and finally wandered around. This group of people did not have a fixed residence and mainly appeared in the small towns. They dared to live in places that others did not dare, since they were alone. Since they lived in the small towns in the forest, why didn't they dare live in Oldman's small town? Not to mention that after joining Oldman's small town, they would have a high status and treatment. There were many people coming to join over this period of time. The matter of Oldman's small town's alliance was something that many surrounding powers were interested in. This kind of innovative management method made these people think about it, and finally some tribes made the decision to give it a try. There was an orc tribe, an ogre tribe, a wolf tribe, and a bear tribe among them. The four great tribes were first-class powers in the surrounding 1,000 miles. Although they did not dare ignore the dark forest law, they would not move around like the small and medium-sized powers. This was because as long as they were not coveted by the experts in the depths of the Forest of Chaos, it was fine if their living area was exposed. The four tribes sent out a group of envoys at almost the same time, arriving at Oldman's small town at almost the same time. On one hand, they were here to investigate, but on the other hand, they were here to gain a deeper understanding of Oldman's small town system. Oldman's small town could accommodate over 100,000 people, and this was under the condition of being self-sufficient. If Oldman's small town gave up on being self-sufficient and relied on miracle commerce to supply them with food and supplies, it would not be a problem for the number of people to increase by 3 times. This was something the other tribes in the forest would find hard to achieve. No matter how strong the tribes were, they could only move around 100 kilometers. All their food, leather, materials, and supplies were obtained from within their range of movement. It was because of this that any tribe's development would have their own bottleneck. When their population reached a certain amount, the resources within their range of movement wouldn't be able to support that many people, which would trigger a survival crisis. As for how to solve this crisis, it was very simple. The first was to move and find a new area with more resources. The second was to split up. A tribe would split into two tribes and the population would scatter, reducing the pressure on survival. The third was war. Not only would war consume a large number of people, they could also steal other people's resources to supplement themselves. Any tribe or small town in the forest of chaos would have a development bottleneck. Oldman's small town did not have this kind of bottleneck. Oldman's small town could give up on being self-sufficient, and with the support of the spatial transportation system and the southern summer country, supporting several million people in theory was not a problem. The four tribes' messengers were very satisfied with Oldman's small town's scale and environment. There was modern technology everywhere in the small town, which made these tribes feel very pleasantly surprised. Oldman's small town was in a canyon and it was an underground city. To most races, it was a very strong city. There were over 5,000 excellent dwarven craftsmen here, constantly forging high-quality equipment and machines for the small town. If they could become partners of the small town, it would be much easier to buy dwarven equipment. This was something the large tribes valued. After the messengers toured the small town for a few days, the Oldman small town's mayor held a meeting. The green-skinned orcs with large fangs, the ogres that were twice as tall and 4 times as strong as humans, the wolf spirit beast that the southern summer humans considered a great enemy, and the bear spirit beast that they had never seen before. When these several races sat at the same table at the same time, everyone had a strange and twisted feeling in their hearts. Actually, these fellows also had a strange feeling in their hearts. They thought that the Oldman small town's mayor would be a dwarf or a barbarian, but who would have thought that the fellow sitting in front of them would be a white-looking young human? Humans were one of the most civilized races on the continent, and their technology developed very quickly. However, there weren't many humans in the Forest of Chaos, so they didn't have a deep impression of humans. He just couldn't understand how a human like him could become the mayor of a town. The dwarf chief introduced, "This human is the founder of Miracle Commerce, Chu Tian. He and his army have the highest proportion of the small town's allied army, so he was elected as the mayor. Since everyone wants to join the small town's allied army, then please take a look at our small town's management rules." Chu Tian had specially prepared a 3-language document, which was written in the orc, ogre, and spirit beast languages. This document is very clearly written. Oldman's small town will open up 30% of the rights to recruit allies. Allies do not need to invest any materials or money, they will only be distributed according to the small town's allied army. The first time they join cannot exceed 5%. We need the most elite warriors, and after the warriors enter the small town, unless the tribe asks to leave the alliance, the original tribe will not be allowed to control them. The warriors that join the small town's allied army must follow the small town's rules, otherwise it will be considered a violation. Wait! An orc shouted out in a somewhat dissatisfied voice, "Why should our warriors be managed by you?" That's right. The wolf man also expressed his dissatisfaction, "My tribe's warriors need to be managed by my tribe." Chu Tian gave 2 cold laughs. "Isn't this request a bit laughable? A territory can only have 1 will and 1 voice, otherwise it will be a mess. You don't want to pay an army in exchange for a chaotic town without a future, right? For the safety and development of the small town, this is a basic principle that cannot be changed." This was a must. If the army was stationed in Oldman's small town and the tribes could freely control the army, wouldn't that be inviting a wolf into the house? What if they rebelled in the future? Although Chu Tian liked to take risks, he wasn't that stupid. Therefore, the foreign troops would be forcefully divided and then given to the barbarians and dwarves they trusted. Using time and systems, they would slowly become their own army. Only by doing this could they ensure that there would be no trouble in the future. The foreign race people discussed with each other. A bear tribesman stood up, "Even if we accept this request, each person will at most have 5% of the small town, that is too little. Even if the small town prospers in the future, we won't get any money. Our bear tribe's warriors, if we send 1,000 elites, their battle strength will surpass this ratio. The bear tribe was very confident in their warriors. But the ogres were even more confident than the bear tribesmen. The ogre's tall and sturdy body stood up. Our ogres are invulnerable and have boundless strength. We only need 500 warriors to surpass this ratio. The barbarians and dwarves, although they were not bad warriors, how could they compare to the incomparably large and dangerous ogres? Chu Tian revealed a faint smile. This battle strength is not just words. As for how much it should be, we still need to evaluate it. Relax, our evaluation is very fair and we won't let the allies suffer a loss. For the safety and stability of the small town, as well as the stability of the Allied army, the first army sent in cannot surpass 5% of the Allied army's strength. As for the benefits, it is not as simple as the small town's dividends. The 4 foreign races were stunned. What other benefits are there? First, the allies can become Miracle Commerce's partners and you can directly buy things from Miracle Commerce. Food, talismans, medicine, equipment, and even some things you can't imagine, we have the ability to provide them and they are all cheap and good. Similarly, you can take your excess resources and even directly buy resources from the forest and sell them to Miracle Commerce. We will buy them at a price that surpasses the Forest of Chaos market price. Any amount is fine. Any amount is fine. A look of disbelief appeared on the faces of the 4 mutated tribe members. If this could really be achieved, then this alone would be able to bring boundless benefits to their tribe. If they could buy food and medicine at any time, then when the tribe was suffering from famine or plague, they could save the entire tribe from disaster. As for Miracle Commerce buying materials at a price higher than the Forest of Chaos market price, this was a large chance for these races to become rich. They were large tribes, so they had many channels for resources. There were many small towns and even cities that had trading points. If they could use these trading points to buy low and sell high, they could make quite a bit of money from this process. Second, after the Allied army is formed, we will become allies. Allied tribes will not only have special privileges in Oldman's small town, we will also provide you with living areas. Other than that, when our allies are threatened, Oldman's small town has the obligation to help our allies pass through the difficulties. This kind of help is not just material. If it is within our abilities, Oldman's small town will send an allied army to help. There were too many races in the forest. No one trusted each other. If the various clans took out an army here, in a sense, it was like buying insurance for their tribe. If the tribe was in trouble, whether it was a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, Oldman's small town would help them and the situation would be much better. Not bad, not bad. This was a cooperation worth trying. Chapter 760. The little fox raised its head and its clear eyes revealed a strange glow. It seemed like it was very interested in the flower fairies because the little fox could feel that the flower fairies' little bodies were hiding a very strong energy. Ayaya, he really never thought of it. This damn place actually had flower fairies. Chu Tian was very surprised by this, just like a treasure hunter who had found an unexpected treasure. The flower fairies had several innate talents and they themselves were very rare treasures, so they were captured in large amounts by humans in the future, finally going extinct. Chu Tian never thought that this mysterious race would appear in the Forest of Chaos. The flower fairies had many abilities. The first was healing. The flower fairies' little bodies contained a very strong innate life energy and they could extract life essence from the earth and plants, using it to heal any animal. If one could tame a flower fairy, it would be equivalent to having several more lives, so just this ability alone was enough to attract people's greed. The second was farming. The flower fairies were natural gardeners, so no matter how hard it was to grow, if the flower fairies took care of it, they would be able to grow it well. Moreover, the flower fairies could increase the growth rate by 10 times. Herbs that took 10 years to mature could be grown in a year. The third was treasure hunting. The flower fairies could communicate with the trees, flowers, and the earth. If there was a treasure hidden in the forest, the flower fairies could easily find it, so they were loved by adventurers. These three were without a doubt abilities. As for the legends of the flower fairies' abilities, Chu Tian had heard a few before. For example, the flower fairies themselves were top-quality supplementary materials, and there were many evil alchemists that could directly refine flowers into pills, directly increasing the quality of pills. For example, when refining half-immortal grade pills, if flower fairies were added, the pills refined would directly increase to immortal grade pills. This statement was not verified, but it was very well founded. Because the flower fairies were innate life forms and were born from the forest's life essence, the flower fairies did not have males and each flower fairy appeared as a female. They were a very rare innate treasure, but because they did not have the ability to reproduce, there were very few flower fairies. Chu Tian looked over the little flower fairies and decided to have a good relationship with them. Flower fairy, what is your name? Aya, you can actually recognize me? I thought that other than the elves, no other race on the continent would know of our existence. The little flower fairy revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. She immediately shook her transparent butterfly wings and circled around Chu Tian. I'm called Lulu. The flower fairy left a trail of sparkling light in the air, which made the little fox scratch a few times with its claws. It used its nose to suck the light into its body and revealed a look of infatuation. Lulu was also one of Chu Tian's worshippers. The video disc player that Aubersen gave Vivian had been borrowed by the flower fairies for a long time. The flower fairies were a rare race and had weak reproductive abilities, so they had a small population. However, in the Tree of Life tribe, they had a very high status. Lulu asked with a naive expression, "Can you really pick down the stars in the sky? What's so hard about it? As long as I can make an aircraft that can fly to outer space, I can open up the mines in outer space." Chu Tian patted his chest and said, "This is a piece of cake for me." Lulu's face was filled with shock and admiration. "Can you really do anything?" There were many things in this world that he couldn't do, so Chu Tian couldn't boast in front of the pure little flower fairy. He just asked in a curious voice, "What, you don't believe me? My skills are very great. Do you want to give it a try?" Lulu fell into Chu Tian's palm and looked at him with a surprised expression. "How do I try?" Chu Tian looked at the flower fairy in his palm without any vigilance and said, "I can guess your flower fairy race's greatest worry. Is that so? Then why don't you tell me? Hasn't the flower fairies been worried about how to make the Tree of Life seed germinate?" Lulu's eyes suddenly popped open. "You? How do you know? Did the wood elves tell you?" "Why would the wood elves tell me this kind of thing?" "Of course not." Chu Tian said with a deep smile, "I also know that the flower fairies have a special ability. You can cultivate any kind of rare plant, but you can't cultivate the Tree of Life seed, am I right?" Lulu nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. The flower fairies have found the Tree of Life seed, but they have been researching it for generations and have not made any progress. Everyone says that the seed has already died and there is no chance of it germinating. Saying this, Lulu revealed a sad expression, but she immediately said in a worshipful voice, "Are you a prophet? How do you know the secret of the flower fairies?" Of course Chu Tian was not a prophet. But in the history of the flower fairies, they had successfully cultivated the Tree of Life sapling. It was because of the Tree of Life sapling that caused a large stir and brought a large disaster to the flower fairies, causing the world tree sapling to be stolen by the humans. It was a pity that the humans did not have the ability to cultivate the Tree of Life, so this top-grade god-grade material withered in the end. This matter had a very deep influence in history and became the fuse for the war between the humans and elves. Of course the humans won in the end. However, later generations of scholars thought that this matter was a large stain on human history, directly destroying the friendship between the humans and elves. Since they had met, this kind of regret could not be allowed to repeat itself. Chu Tian said to Lulu, "I have a way to help the flower fairies awaken the Tree of Life seed." "Really?" Lulu's voice increased by several times. "What method is that? Quickly tell Lulu." Chu Tian slowly said, the tree of life seed has not died, it has only fallen into a deep sleep. This is because after the great ancient era, there was no longer any suitable soil for the tree of life to grow. So no matter how much effort the flower fairies put into cultivating it, it would be useless in the end. Actually, it is not hard to awaken the tree of life seed. As long as we collect the great ancient aura that hasn't dissipated from the space and use a special method to pour this aura into the seed, we can awaken the seed. Lulu was confused hearing this. How do we do this? This involves very high-level technology, especially spatial technology. I am very willing to help the flower fairies, but it's a pity that the current me is unable to help. Chu Tian said with a sigh, the tree of life is a divine object, not being able to see it germinate is my regret. Lulu thought for a few seconds before flying up, you don't need to worry, I will think of a way. I definitely won't let the wood elves kill you. I promise. After saying this, the little flower fairies charged out the window and instantly disappeared. The little fox rolled its eyes. Its master really knew how to trick little girls, but thinking of the smell of the flower fairies, it couldn't help licking it. If it could eat a few flower fairies, it would definitely be able to evolve. Don't mess around. Chu Tian knocked the fox's head. The flower fairies have a deep relationship with the elves. Do you want to become enemies with the elves? The little fox gave a snort and spat out a mouthful of saliva in disdain. If they didn't eat it, then they wouldn't eat it. What was the big deal? Actually, compared to the little flower fairies, the fox was more interested in the tree of life. Although it knew that its master liked to trick people, his abilities weren't bad. Since he had made a solemn promise, perhaps he really could cultivate the tree of life. After a few days, Aeldis brought Chu Tian out. The elven court had already been set up. Chu Tian was going to be a suspect, but he was going to be judged by the elves. The ancient Tree of Life tribe had not opened the elven court in 300 years. Because of Princess Vivian's relationship this time, it had attracted the attention of the tribe. When Chu Tian arrived at the elven court, he was stunned for a while. The elven court was in a strange forest, with several dozen giant trees densely surrounding it. Each tree was as thick as 20 people wrapping their arms around it, rising up from the ground like tall houses. There were many natural structures on the tree trunks that were filled with elves, and there were many elves standing on the branches. This tedious and complicated ceremony lasted for 2 hours before Chu Tian and Vivian were brought out. The surrounding elves were all discussing, it was the first time most of them had seen a human. When those young elven children saw Chu Tian appear, they were all very excited, but also very worried. On the tallest tree in the center, an old elven man stood up. Beside him were several elders of the Tree of Life tribe. They should be the main judge of this trial. I am the Elven Council's Vice Speaker Ulysses. This old elf gave a simple introduction, with the forest and life god as witness. We will now begin the Elven Court's trial. Chu Tian was a bit impatient. We'll first ask the victim, the Tree of Life's third elder Aubersen, to come out. The elven elder Aubersen came out. When he saw the little princess staring at him, he couldn't help feeling a bit apprehensive. However, she was still a victim and the little princess was too arrogant. If he didn't teach her a lesson this time, she would definitely cause trouble in the future. Chu Tian was already very impatient. The elves had too long of a lifespan, doing everything slowly. When could they be a bit more efficient? At this time, several thumping sounds came from the surroundings. The elves all looked over in surprise and saw incomparably tall Traians slowly walking over. Ulysses asked in a surprised voice, "Why has the Honorable Traians suddenly come?" The Traians normally did not move and most of the time they stayed still. Who would have thought that they would come today? Just as everyone was astonished, the leader of the Traians said bluntly, "This human is a guest of the Traiant tribe. We do not wish to be accused of any crimes." When these words were said, the entire elven race was stunned. The elves had prepared for many days, doing their homework and collecting evidence. When they were finally about to have a fair and just trial, a group of Traians suddenly appeared, making everyone feel shocked. That's right, I'm here to supervise the trial. If Chu Tian is not guilty, don't think of making it hard for him. Several flower fairies flew out from the trance. He is also a guest of us flower fairies. Chapter 761. These four large tribes decided to send troops to defend Oldman's small town and let their clansmen join the allied army. The news quickly spread through the various forest trading points. Oldman's small town was about to become popular. Among the powers in this area, these four large tribes were among the best. Oldman's small town's performance was very eye-catching, defeating the tens of thousands of spider army twice. Although their strength was not clear, they should not be inferior. Now that Oldman's small town had won over these four large allies, it would be hard for it not to become popular in the future. Several days ago, everyone felt that this was the most dangerous small town in the forest. At this moment, everyone felt that this was the safest small town in the forest. Oldman's small town's groundbreaking management method was something that had never appeared in the Forest of Chaos before. Anyone could become the small town's master or manager, turning a small town into a place governed by countless powers. This was without a doubt a first. In the evening, the four large tribes' troops arrived. Chu Tian brought Yingying and Nangong Yun out to welcome them. When Nangong Yun saw the densely packed troops, her eyes almost popped out. Damn, this many foreign races, are we really going to let them live in our small town? Are you sure there won't be any trouble? 3,000 green-skinned orcs, each one of them fat and strong. They had axes hanging from their waists and strange little braids, so they were filled with an untamed wildness. 3,000 wolf tribe spirit beasts were also neatly standing in the small town. They all had blades on their waists, and these wolf tribe people were experts in tracking. Their claws were sharp weapons that could easily tear an enemy's body apart. The 1,000 bear tribe spirit beasts were like 1,000 iron towers, each one was close to 3 meters tall. That broad physique and that tall and sturdy body made people feel fear. Those thick bear paws could shatter profound iron with a single slap. The most exaggerated one was the 500 ogres. Ogres were one of the most notorious races in the forest. They were pure meat eaters, with large bodies and large appetites. So once there were too many ogres, famine was a common matter. Once the ogres were hungry. That was a very terrifying matter. Because hunger could completely destroy an ogre's rationality, they could crazily eat anything made of meat, whether it was animal, foreign race, or human. It was because of this that they had this kind of nickname. Strictly speaking, ogres were not considered an intelligent race. They were an existence between demon beasts and intelligent life forms. Ogres did not have any cultivation techniques or the ability to awaken their source spirits, but ogres had demon cores that were similar to demon beasts, which gave ogres great strength. 500 ogres standing in front of them were like 500 little mountains. The ogres wore tattered aprons and were almost naked. Most of their bodies were covered in moss and parasites. Ogres did not have any production capabilities, so they were very poor. Luckily, their copper skin and iron bones were better than any weapon. Even if they were unarmed, they could still survive as demon beasts, allowing this species to survive from ancient times until now. These fellows could run around the battlefield a few times naked and not die even if their bodies were pierced with weapons. If they could make a set of armor for them and forge an octagonal hammer, these 500 ogres would instantly turn into 500 armored meat grinders. Meng Ying's heart was filled with apprehension. Chu Tian, isn't this a bit too much? It won't bring us trouble, right? If these fellows go crazy, then wouldn't the little town that was built with great difficulty be destroyed? Whether it was the spirit beasts, the orcs, or the ogres, they were not good-tempered races. Chu Tian waved his hand in an uncaring manner. Don't worry, it can be taken care of. These soldiers were all carefully selected. They were young, strong, and had potential. Just based on the allied army of the 4 foreign races, their battle strength could not be underestimated. Not bad. This was a very strong force. As for whether they would rebel or not, this was not impossible. The Forest of Chaos did not care about principles and they could fall out at any time, but Chu Tian was confident that he could stabilize the 4 tribes. Actually, the 4 tribes did not realize that they had already fallen into Chu Tian's trap. They would become more and more dependent on miracle commerce from now on, and it would be hard for them to retreat. This was because there was a limit to the number and quality of the troops that could enter Oldman's small town. Not to mention that after any troops entered Oldman's small town, Chu Tian would personally regroup them and they would only listen to the mayor's orders. Even if there was a special situation, the Berserker army would be enough to clean up the mess. The 7,000 to 8,000 soldiers walked into the Oldman's small town's main hall. Actually, most of the people sent out this time were youths of the tribes and most of them had never left the 200-kilometer radius of the tribe. Therefore, when they came to Oldman's small town, they found everything here very new. Pa! Suddenly a large electric light was turned on. That bright light instantly filled the main hall, making it as bright as day. Whether it was the orcs, wolves, bear people, or ogres, they were all filled with shock as they looked around them. At this time, a burst of passionate music came from the speakers all around them. It was like a dancing flame, like a surging river, like a roaring sea, making the listeners feel comfortable and filled with heroism. How did they do this? The foreign races all had faces filled with shock. Welcome to Oldman's small town, I am the mayor Chu Tian. Chu Tian stood on top of a stone building, looking down at the several thousand new soldiers. From now on, you will all be members of Oldman's small town. We will be responsible for your living expenses and every half a month you will be given a pill to increase your cultivation based on your strength. You just need to focus on protecting the small town and witness how this nameless small town rises and soars into the sky. Roar, roar, roar. Everyone began to roar out in excitement. This allied army's treatment was too high. They would eat and drink well every day, they would be subsidized for cultivation, and they would enjoy a good living environment, as well as the convenience of the market. This kind of treatment compared to the tribes, it was simply the difference between clouds and mud. Who wouldn't want to live such a good life? These soldiers would be stationed in Oldman's small town for a while, perhaps they wouldn't be able to leave even if they wanted to. Chu Tian wanted to turn Oldman's small town into a trading center for the northern forest area. This place would become the strongest power in the border area. Through Oldman's small town, he would obtain the support of the locals. When the time and strength were ripe, it would be time for Chu Tian to compete. When Chu Tian finished his speech, he immediately split up the troops and reorganized them according to the Allied army's model. Then he divided them into battalions and had the dwarves lead them back to the living area. This was a matter that everyone was happy about. From Chu Tian's point of view, the 4 powerful enemies had become allies. This way, he could avoid a direct conflict with them as they grew stronger. The most important thing was that these locals had lived in the Forest of Chaos for many years, so they were already familiar with the market's location. The Forest of Chaos was very rich in resources, so Chu Tian could use their influence to collect resources. From the small town's point of view, there were many large powers stationed in Oldman's small town, so it was as stable as a mountain. Unless it was a stronger outsider, the tribes within a 1,000-mile radius would not dare to attack them. From the perspective of these soldiers, they were treated very well, especially the ogres. It was not easy for the ogres to eat their fill. Although the ogres had a strong battle strength, there were often famines among the ogres, so they had to eat each other in the end. Just Chu Tian's promise that they could eat their fill was enough to make many ogres willing to work for him. The only thing the 4 tribes were dissatisfied with was the distribution of ownership of the small town. This batch of troops were all elites of the tribes, but after Oldman's small town's evaluation, other than the ogres, the other troops did not even make up 5% of the alliance army. Of course, the people of these tribes were very dissatisfied with this. Regarding this, Chu Tian did not waste his breath explaining it to them. He directly pulled out the berserkers to practice with them. The result was obvious. The strength of those berserk barbarians was so terrifying that they could almost defeat an ogre. What could these barbarians do to them? The locals were shocked by the Berserk army's battle strength. They still could not figure out what kind of power Miracle Commerce was. What kind of method did he use to turn these slow-witted barbarians into such a perverted person? If there were another 30 to 50,000 of these berserkers, these tribal chiefs could only kneel down. Forget it. Forget it. It's just a little bit of fame. At worst they would just fill it up with more people. What the four tribes were truly moved by was Miracle Commerce's background. Not everyone had Vivian's spatial energy that could cross thousands of kilometers in an instant, and not every team could be like the barbarians' berserker army, climbing over mountains for 4-5 days without feeling tired at all. Most of the forest races did not interact with the outside world, so they could not form a large-scale economy. These forest natives lacked weapons, especially pills, talismans, and other consumables. But the Forest of Chaos was very dangerous, so there were very few caravans that would bring large amounts of goods here. This caused the prices of these consumables to be very high. But the Forest of Chaos was very dangerous, and there were very few caravans that would bring large amounts of goods here, causing the prices of these consumables to be very high. They could have as much as they wanted. Miracle Commerce did not just accept source stones, they could also exchange herbs, leather, and metals. The most important thing was that because they were allies with Miracle Commerce's prices were far lower than the forest market. The most important thing was that because they were allies with Miracle Commerce, the price Miracle Commerce sold them was far lower than the market price in the forest. Miracle Commerce seemed like they had an endless supply. They could collect leather, metals, and herbs to exchange for potions, pills, and talismans. After selling them in the forest market, they could buy leather, metals, and herbs. This kind of repeated sales allowed their tribes to quickly become rich. After selling them in the market in the forest, they would buy leather, metals, and herbs. By repeatedly reselling them, the tribes would quickly become rich. Chapter 762. This had to be Lulu's help. The flower fairies had a very close relationship with the Treants, so if Lulu told the Treants about Chu Tian's matter, the Treants would not sit idly by. Since there was someone supporting him, he would have less to worry about. Chu Tian wanted to retreat unscathed, but it seemed like he couldn't retreat unscathed. He had to at least obtain a bit more benefits. The elven trial began and an elf loudly said, Vivian secretly left the tribe and went to a human kingdom, not returning for an entire 2 months. We even have evidence that Vivian participated in the human and spirit beast wars and killed a spirit beast kingdom's king. This is a serious violation of the ancestors' teachings, and the evidence is conclusive. She will be imprisoned for at least 50 years. He paused before saying, Vivian stole the tribe elder Aubersen's immortal herb and secretly gave it to the human Chu Tian. She even joined Chu Tian's organization and abandoned herself to work for the humans, damaging the elven race's image. Then she led the humans back to the Forest of Chaos to fight with the spirit insects and killed the Spider Queen Alexis' descendants, worsening the relationship between the elves and the spirit insects. She will be imprisoned for at least 100 years. Finally he came to a conclusion, Vivian is the Elven King's youngest daughter, but she did not set an example, instead corrupting the Elven race's culture. She has a very bad influence, so I recommend that she be heavily punished. She will be stripped of her princess status and be imprisoned for 200 years. 200 years. The elves all sucked in a cold breath. Vivian, these accusations. Ulysses asked in a low voice, what do you want to say? Even for the elves, 200 years was half a lifetime. There were very few elves that had received such a heavy punishment. Vivian's face was a bit pale, but she clenched her teeth and gave a snort, looking like she didn't care at all. Although Vivian has violated the clan's rules, something rarely seen in the elves in the last 100 years. But for Princess Vivian to do this kind of thing, the human Chu Tian cannot escape responsibility. Now it was time to settle accounts with Chu Tian. Vivian stole the immortal herb and gave it to Chu Tian. The person who invited Vivian to join the human company was also Chu Tian. Vivian was involved in the war between the humans and the spirit beasts as well as the spirit insects. It was all because of Chu Tian. The matter of humans stealing elves has happened all over the continent. Raping, humiliating, and even forcing elves to engage in the dirty flesh trade is not uncommon. This was something that every elf hated, and Chu Tian's method of using Vivian was exactly the same, so there was no doubt that he would be severely punished. I recommend the death penalty. The elven old men discussed with each other for a few minutes before they all nodded. If the sentence for Vivian was heavy, then there was no objection to Chu Tian's sentence. This damn human was a truly despicable fellow. He actually used the pure and kind elves. This was simply unforgivable. These old elves had seen too many evil deeds. Elves would often be captured by human traffickers in the forest, and after these human traffickers caught elves, most of them would be sold to human countries. In the eyes of the elves, humans were a dirty race without a bottom line. Although the elves did not have any enmity with humans, they did not like humans at all. In their eyes, there was no human that didn't have a dirty motive for coming into contact with the elves, so their motive for Vivian was not pure. Letting the elves suffer this kind of crisis, even if they were killed several times, it would be hard to recover from this negative impact. Ulysses said to Chu Tian, "Human, the elves are a just race, I'll give you a chance to defend yourself." "Defend my ass." The elves' faces fell. Chu Tian broke out in laughter. "I've long heard that the elves are stupid, but I've finally seen it today. No wonder the elves are declining on the continent. Not to mention humans, you spirit beasts can't even compare to them. Otherwise, how could you do such a stupid thing? Destroying your own city walls while feeling superior." The elves were instantly filled with anger. What kind of noble and proud race was this? Being compared to spirit beasts, this was no longer an insult, this was a naked provocation. Ulysses had no expression on his face as he softly said, "You insulted the noble elves with your arrogant words. Adding to your crime does not help, it will only add to it. I advise you to be careful with your words, you don't have many chances left." Noble, righteous, elegant, and kind, the elves always liked to label themselves. Chu Tian was not servile or overbearing as he fearlessly said, "What I see is a group of short-sighted pedantic people who don't think about advancing and are content with their current situation. They only know how to immerse themselves in their glorious history, but they don't dare face the future as cowards. The most laughable thing is that these cowards want to make these damn rules, binding and persecuting the true pioneers of the race, persecuting the true heroes of the race, like Princess Vivian." Everyone was dumbfounded. Even Vivian herself was stunned. When did she become the elves' hero? She became the pioneer of the elves' reform? What did this have to do with anything? Ulysses stood up, full of nonsense. "Since you've given up your chance to argue, don't blame the elves for not giving you a chance. Someone." "Sir Vice Speaker." Chu Tian's words were sharp as he pointed at Ulysses. "I only want to ask you a question. Looking at your appearance, you should be over 600 years old, but you've lived for all these years. What have you done for the elves? What changes have you made to the elves with your high position?" Ulysses was a bit speechless. He slightly knit his brows as he said, "My race pursues freedom and rule by doing nothing. How can you vain humans understand this? The spirit beasts have already crippled the elves and you still want to rule by doing nothing? Since you want to rule by doing nothing, what is the use of the Elven Council? You should just disband it earlier." Chu Tian's words became sharper and sharper. "You're always immersed in your race's past glory, always immersed in your sense of superiority. The ones who are truly vain are you elves. Not abdicating your position, not achieving anything, harming others and yourself. Will you only wake up after your race is exterminated?" Ulysses was finally angered. No matter how good the elves' tempers were, they couldn't take Chu Tian's repeated insults. "All right, then I'll ask you, how does Vivian's actions affect the elves?" Chu Tian passionately said to Vivian. Princess Vivian was moved by the elves and decided to find a way to save the elves. Finally, through Miracle Commerce's products, she learned of our new era's technology. In order to bring new technology to the elves, Vivian did not hesitate to steal an immortal herb and traveled tens of thousands of kilometers to save me. He told the whole story with embellished details. I am a southern summer human, not knowing anything about the elven forest and not knowing Princess Vivian. I was moved by Vivian's sincerity, so I took in Princess Vivian. I taught her a high-class human cultivation technique, as well as the world's best technology. Vivian knew the rigid rules of the elves, so she hid in the southern summer country to make up for it. She wanted to learn a peerless cultivation technique, master the best technology, and then come back to lead the elves in a revolution. Who would have thought that our hearts were filled with sincerity? How could we be as dirty as you think? The elves were all speechless. Without waiting for the elves to speak, Chu Tian righteously asked, "Please use your brain that hasn't been used in several hundred years to think about it. The southern summer country is only a small country, how could I attract Princess Vivian? I am only in the awakened soul realm and we are tens of thousands of kilometers apart. I can't even pass through the forest of chaos with my strength, so how could I attract the elves in the forest?" Ulysses knit his brows. Then how did Vivian know of your existence? Vivian was in the fourth true spirit layer and could be considered an expert even in the forest of chaos. How could someone with this kind of strength be tricked by an awakened soul realm cultivator? This was a completely unreasonable matter. Chu Tian coldly said, "Then you'll have to ask an elven elder." At this time, a few elves around them called out. It was Elder Aubersen who brought the video disc player back to the tribe. We all knew Chu Tian from the video disc player. Aubersen revealed an awkward expression. The reason why Vivian knew Chu Tian was because of him. Ulysses asked Aubersen, "What is going on with this matter?" Reporting to the vice speaker, "When I was passing through the southern summer country, I found something different from the southern summer country, so I brought it back as a gift for the princess. I never thought it would develop like this." Ulysses then asked, "Vivian, what did you do in the 2 months you were with the humans?" Vivian looked at Chu Tian with a questioning gaze. Chu Tian nodded to her and she boldly said, "I have been secretly cultivating the void-escaping, spatial cultivation technique that Chu Tian gave me and I am also learning the space warehouse's techniques." Spatial cultivation technique? The elves were all shocked. Vivian never had a suitable cultivation technique for herself, this was something everyone knew. Could it be that she had already grasped a spatial cultivation technique? This was simply impossible. How rare was a spatial cultivation technique, how could a human take it out? Ulysses then asked, "What is the space warehouse?" "Before I was captured, I was a spatial engineer for Miracle Commerce." Vivian proudly stuck out her chest, "I had already developed a space warehouse and wanted to complete a second space warehouse. Then I asked Chu Tian for permission to bring this space warehouse back for my clansmen to use. In the end, before the second space warehouse was completed, I was captured by you all." Vivian carefully explained the characteristics of the space warehouse to the elves. The elves all sucked in a breath of cold air when they heard this. Aeldis and Aubersen all stared with wide eyes. How could there be this kind of magical technology in this world? Could it be that the humans had already progressed to this level? If it really was like this, the elves should reflect on themselves. They clearly had tens of thousands of years of history, but they had been thrown this far by the humans. "I've decided to take back the space warehouse. From now on, I won't share any technology with the elves." Chu Tian directly said, "As for the cultivation technique I'll give to the princess, I'll treat it as repayment for the medicine. If you want to kill me now, then do as you wish. I believe that after I die 100 years, the humans will take revenge for me and flatten the elves in the forest of chaos. And the elves will forever be marked as a disgrace in history because of their ingratitude, filthy, and narrow-mindedness." Vivian's body trembled. How could she know that Chu Tian was purposely provoking the elves? "You've destroyed everything, it's all been destroyed by you." She, who didn't have any reaction when the elves announced that she would be locked up for 200 years, suddenly began to cry. She angrily shouted, I'm ashamed to be associated with you all." Just lock me up for 1,000 years, I don't want to see you all anymore. Chapter 763. The Oldman small towns reform was beginning to show results. After the 4 large tribes joined in, there were also some medium-sized powers joining in. Oldman's small town had 30% of its control open to the public, the dwarves had 19%, and Chu Tian had 51%, but he still had absolute control over the small town. Miracle Commerce began to build hotels, theaters, and hotels in the small town. They were prepared to turn this small town in the forest into a modern city, greatly enriching the lives of the townspeople. Oldman's small town's popularity increased day by day. With this speed, it would soon become the largest power on the edge of the forest. But Chu Tian had to prepare for a rainy day. The small town was becoming more and more prosperous. It was only a matter of time before it attracted the attention of the large characters in the forest. With Miracle Commerce's current strength, it was fine for them to fight on the edge of the forest, but it was still a bit too early for them to be involved in that level of battle. Miracle Commerce had the support of the Southern Summer Country behind them, but the Southern Summer Country was still a small country. Moreover, the Southern Summer Country was very far from here, so they couldn't send reinforcements even if they wanted to. So, facing the true giants in the forest, they could only quickly develop themselves and grow before they could react. Or they could gather more allies and form an alliance that could protect themselves. Chu Tian. Chu Tian. When Chu Tian heard Mang Yingying's shout, he didn't even have time to turn around before this girl charged into Chu Tian's room and excitedly shouted, "There are several pieces of good news." Chu Tian looked at her with a strange expression. "What good news?" The dwarves said that they found a large crystal mine in the forest several decades ago. It was around 400 miles from here, and elder sister Nangong went with the dwarves to confirm it. She even took a few pictures and sent them back. "Take a look." Chu Tian's expression slightly changed because from the pictures in Mang Yingying's hands, there was no doubt that this was a crystal mine. Only what flowed in the oil field was actually silver oil, which was completely different from the white oil in South Sky City. The crystal oil's energy level would affect its color. Low grade was white, middle grade was silver, and high grade was gold. In other words, this oil mine discovered by the dwarves a few decades ago was actually a silver crystal oil mine. Its value was not ordinary at all. The silver oil field was around 20 times stronger than the white oil field. If the silver oil field could be made into source energy batteries, it could be used to activate third level and above source energy arrays. Therefore, it could be used to create even higher level technology, especially suitable for maintaining a large space warehouse. If it could be used to create source energy weapons, its power would not be something the white oil field could compare to. All right. Chu Tian nodded in satisfaction. Find people to investigate the surroundings. I want to know the distribution of the nearby powers and the specific size of the oil field. The silver crystal oil was still a bit early for Miracle Commerce, but they would need it sooner or later, so it wasn't wrong to prepare it first. The environment of the Forest of Chaos could not compare to the Southern Summer Country. Although there were rich resources everywhere, it was not easy to develop it. The locals in the forest were very sensitive, and the slightest movement would cause them to overreact. Not to mention the fact that the crystal oil was a dangerous item. If it was destroyed by someone, it would be a large loss. Elder sister Nangong has personally led people to investigate, you can be assured. Meng Yingying said this and then suddenly said, I just talked to elder sister. The 2 warehouses Miracle Commerce bought in Southern State are about to explode from the amount of materials being transported here. They have harvested over 400 level 2 sacred herbs in this period of time. There are over 300 low-grade sacred herbs, over 60 middle-grade sacred herbs, over 20 high-grade sacred herbs, and 5 top-grade sacred herbs. 5 top-grade sacred herbs. Each sacred herb in the Southern Summer Country was very precious. In a place like the Forest of Chaos, normal herbs and elixirs were everywhere. Even sacred herbs were common in demon beast nests and could be obtained as long as one was willing to take the risk. If these herbs were placed in the southern summer country or any other human country, they would require a very high price to purchase, and there would be a situation where there was no supply. In the Forest of Chaos, Miracle Commerce could purchase large amounts of these at a tenth of the price. Miracle Commerce's business in the Forest of Chaos was almost unrivaled. This was because when a traditional company came to the Forest of Chaos to do business, the transportation, risk, labor, and time costs did not exist for Miracle Commerce. The Forest of Chaos' complex terrain could not stop Miracle Commerce from transporting materials. There were demon beasts and locals everywhere in the Forest of Chaos, so they could not threaten Miracle Commerce's goods. The most important thing was efficiency. Miracle Commerce had the space warehouse in their hands, so their efficiency was something no company could compare to. The raw materials in the Forest of Chaos were sent to the southern summer country through the space warehouse. After they were made into finished products, they were sent back to the Forest of Chaos and sold at a price several times higher. Then they used the profits to purchase raw materials. Repeating this, it was unknown how many times Miracle Commerce had made profits in the time it took for a traditional company to go back and forth. Chu Tian said to Yingying, "Did you bring the information on the high-grade and top-grade sacred herbs?" Meng Yingying nodded and immediately handed over a list of materials. "The materials we bought are all here." Chu Tian could make this judgment with a single glance. These high-grade and top-grade sacred herbs were mostly used to increase one's cultivation base. There were only a few that were used for detoxification, healing, or increasing one's lifespan. This also meant that after these sacred herbs were refined into pills, they could easily increase a cultivator's strength. These 5 top-grade sacred herbs were very precious. If the refining method was right, even if it was given to a peak 9th awakened soul layer cultivator, it was very likely for them to break through their bottleneck and enter the true spirit realm. With the resources he had now, it was enough for him to step into the awakened soul realm. As for the others, they didn't need to worry. With the small town's current development speed, wasn't it just a matter of 5-8 days? Go tell the warehouse to leave these herbs behind, I want to personally refine them. Chu Tian didn't trust the skills of those old men. Meng Yingying's eyes popped out, leave them behind? Chu Tian nodded in satisfaction, nonsense, why are we running a company? Isn't it to collect cultivation resources? Let everyone prepare. It's time for us to increase our strength. Also, tell the young miss that the forest has stabilized. Let her take care of matters in the southern summer country and immediately come here to help. Without her by my side, my back has been aching and my body has been uncomfortable. Now I know that without the young miss, a day really feels like a year. Speaking without thinking, pay. Meng Yingying rolled her eyes at him. But after not seeing her elder sister for so long, her heart missed her a bit. Although through the image transferring mirror and the communication device, they could communicate even if they were separated by tens of thousands of miles, this kind of communication was not as practical as meeting face to face. The Forest of Chaos had already stabilized. Elder sister should have already done what she needed to do in Southern State. Now it was time for everyone to come over. Come, we're going to the small town to take a look. Chu Tian stood up and pulled Meng Yingying's hand. Meng Yingying's pretty face turned slightly red, but she did not resist. The two of them strolled around the small town's market. After the small town was developed, it was filled with vitality. Especially the space above the mine, this was the largest and now it had become a free market. There were soldiers from the Allied army patrolling and several barbarians with ogres, orcs, and bear people passing by. With this kind of powerful patrol, no one dared to cause trouble in Oldman's small town. Several goblins were bargaining with the rabbit people, hoping to buy a herb from the rabbit people at a low price. In front of them, there were 2 gnome merchants selling strange tools to the big-eared monsters. Not far away, there was a group of mouse people carrying rare ores, looking for buyers. All kinds of languages and races intertwined in this small town in the belly of the mountain. These very weak races had always lived in the lowest levels of the Forest of Chaos, but now in Oldman's small town, they dared to openly do business. At this time, a young ogre holding a large basket passed by the two of them. Although it was a young ogre, it was much taller than Chu Tian and Meng Yingying. Its thick arms were as thick as Chu Tian's thighs. The ogre held up some specialties. There were some fruits and some demon beast cores. He said in broken human language, cheap. Buy some. Meng Yingying took out a complete low-grade source stone and placed it in his rough hand. Then he randomly picked a few things and the little ogre excitedly thanked her. The little ogre ran into Miracle Commerce's hotel and bought a large amount of Miracle Commerce's canned meat. Ogres did not have any resistance to canned meat. The Oldman small town's hotel had already been built. But it was different from the hotel in the city. Although there were spirit beasts, orcs, and dwarves in the Oldman small town's hotel, the hotel did not rely on business to make money. This hotel being opened here was more like an experience store for the forest races. The wine-making and cooking techniques in the forest were very poor. Miracle Commerce's wine was fermented with source energy arrays and Miracle Commerce's food was cooked with source energy arrays. Therefore, the Oldman small town's hotel mainly dealt in large orders of wine and canned food. After the dwarves tasted Miracle Commerce's wine, they immediately ordered 500 barrels from Miracle Commerce. When the warriors of the various tribes tasted Miracle Commerce's food, they looked up into the sky and cheered. They had lived all these years in vain. Then Miracle Commerce bought over 100,000 cans of canned food. Miracle Commerce opened a medicine shop and talisman shop in the small town. The store was the same. Although it looked like a retail store, the true profit came from the large orders from the tribes. No matter how much they needed, Miracle Commerce could always send them out like magic. This speed and efficiency was very high, as if everything was already prepared. But, how could they store all these things in such a small mine? They had been observing for several days, but they had never seen Miracle Commerce's caravan enter or leave. Miracle Commerce's mysterious abilities made the locals feel even more awe towards them. Chu Tian saw the small town develop in the direction he wanted and his heart was filled with happiness. But at this time, this is bad. Feng Kaidai ran in front of Chu Tian in a panic. There are many elves outside. Chu Tian was stunned. Elves? Where did these elves come from? Chapter 764. When Miracle Commerce's technology was spread across the continent, Chu Tian would become a great sage in the history of the human race. Then what Chu Tian said would most likely happen. If they killed Chu Tian now, the elves would be cursed and it would become an excuse for the humans to attack the elves in the future. This matter could happen in 100 years and to the elves, 100 years was not a long time. Aeldis thought of Chu Tian's words in the past 2 days. She thought this human was just speaking nonsense, but now it seemed like it was possible. Did the elves really want to take this risk to kill Chu Tian? The Tree of Life tribe's third elder Obersen had been to the southern summer country before and had seen all kinds of magical products. When he heard Chu Tian's words, his heart couldn't help turning cold. Sir Vice Speaker, I suggest we stop here. As for the nature of this case, we have to discuss it and collect evidence before making a decision. All right. Ulysses couldn't make a decision for a while, we'll stop here for today. Chu Tian was not locked up by the elves, rather he was taken away by the Traiant and the flower fairies. Vivian saw Chu Tian sitting on the Traiant and being escorted away by a group of flower fairies, making her feel incomparably defeated. She hadn't joined Miracle Commerce for long, but this was the first thing she loved from the bottom of her heart. If she lost it because of the elves, it would be an unprecedented large blow to Vivian. Princess Vivian. Aeldis walked in front of Vivian. The vice speaker wants you to go over and explain everything clearly. Vivian angrily shouted, what's there to explain? The elves looked at each other in blank dismay. The Trent's size was related to their strength and age. In normal situations, the bigger they were, the longer they lived and the stronger they were. When Chu Tian was brought to the Treant tribe, he immediately saw a treant that was over 100 meters tall standing in front of him. It was like a mountain that he couldn't see the top of. Its entire body was covered in dense leaves, and each leaf was as bright as jade, emitting an incomparably vigorous life force. This treant's legs were deeply rooted in the ground, as if it hadn't moved for several hundred years. That wrinkled face was filled with the vicissitudes of time. The protector of the forest, the Treant chief, Cenarius. This was an old treant that had lived for over 10,000 years. With a casual slap, even a true spirit realm expert would be turned into meat paste. Not to mention that the Treants were not a race that relied on brute force, the power accumulated in a 10,000-year-old treant was unimaginably strong. Cenarius had an unimaginable intelligence, even the Elven king had to be respectful to him. You really are brave. Lulu led a group of flower fairies to circle around Chu Tian. In today's situation, you actually dared to impolitely teach the elves a lesson. It truly opened my eyes. But the elves have been in a bad situation these past few years, I hope they can wake up. Chu Tian shrugged his shoulders. Wake up my ass. If they could be changed that easily, would they still be elves? The elves were naturally like this, it wouldn't be of any use. Chu Tian walked in front of Cenarius and gave him a very polite bow, but he said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Respected forest protector Cenarius, what orders do you have for this one?" Cenarius was one of the legends of the forest. No matter who it was, they would be very nervous when they saw Cenarius, but Chu Tian did not show any discomfort at all. Rather his expression was calm and his words were appropriate, as if he was talking to an old friend. This made Lulu feel great admiration. Young human. A deep and wise old voice came from the ground, your words about the elves are too radical. The elves are not a race that likes to fight, I'm afraid they cannot accept your point of view. Cenarius was a powerful treant. As long as he wanted to, he could hear all sounds within several thousand miles, so he knew everything that happened in the elven court. Chu Tian calmly said, the continent has been in turmoil since ancient times, but what is the reason? Is it a struggle for resources or a struggle for land? No. All living beings in the world are born greedy, so they fight. They are born selfish, so they steal. They are born with ears and eyes, so they are infatuated with pleasure. They are born cruel, so they are destined to kill and kill. In such an environment, how could the elven clan be pure and clean? The day the elves truly wake up to this, it will already be too late. Although this one's words are sharp, to the elves, they are painstaking. Cenarius did not comment on Chu Tian's words, your knowledge and wisdom does not match your age, it seems like you are hiding a secret that no one knows about. Could it be that this old thing saw something? This was an old thing that had lived for over 10,000 years. Although Chu Tian was very confident, in front of this kind of wisdom that had been accumulated over the years, he did not dare be careless. But the Treants have never interfered with the elves. Cenarius did not seem to be interested in this matter, today I've invited the Treants as guests. I won't talk about the elves or right or wrong, I just want to talk about the matter of the Tree of Life seed. I heard from the flower fairies that you have a way to awaken the seed, how confident are you? Chu Tian thought about it and said, the Tree of Life seed is an innate divine object, it will not die easily. However, wanting to awaken it is not an easy matter. Although I have a certain amount of confidence, I am not 100% certain. I have to give it a try first. The Tree of Life was very important to the flower fairies, Treants, and elves. If the Tree of Life could be revived, the survival of the three races would greatly increase. Chu Tian was a human in the end, should he believe him or not? Cenarius did not directly state his position, the Tree of Life has never been seen by an outsider, so how do you know the characteristics of the Tree of Life? I had a fortuitous encounter and obtained a fragment of an ancient god's memory. There were many things about the great ancient era recorded inside, as well as some secrets and records about the Tree of Life. From this crystal, I naturally understood the characteristics of the tree of life. Combined with my research in the spatial domain, I think this will be a very effective method. An ancient god's memory crystal. The Traians were very shocked. The spiritual gods had been dead for countless years, and this human could obtain a spiritual god's memory crystal. This was truly a great opportunity. Chu Tian was very interested in the Traians. This was after all a strong ally. If he could obtain the Trent's support, miracle commerce would be able to move freely in the forest. So Chu Tian had already prepared all kinds of excuses and tricks. He wanted to trick the Traians bit by bit, even if this was not an easy matter. After all, the Trent's 10,000 years of wisdom was not just for show. Miracle commerce, the flower fairies, and the Traians, if the three of us work together, we can completely replant the ancient tree of life. The flower fairies Lulu and the others immediately nodded. They were at their wits' end. If Chu Tian came to help, this might not be a bad idea. The ancient tree of life had an incredible creative power. If they could replant the tree of life, it would definitely have a large impact. This would fulfill the dream of the Traians, flower fairies, and elves for tens of thousands of years. Chu Tian believed that this was a cooperation that he could not refuse. As long as the Traians nodded, miracle commerce would have a chance to rely on this mountain. As for the elves, you don't want me, I don't want you. This matter, I have to think about it. Who would have thought that Cenarius would suddenly not want to talk about it? Lulu, take the guest for a walk nearby. Chu Tian slightly knit his brows. This old Traian did not play his cards according to common sense, so Chu Tian had no way to make a move. Cenarius did not want to talk about it, so Chu Tian could not force him. He could only say, then I'll be leaving. Lulu circled around Chu Tian in a very lively manner. Chu Tian, the Traiant forest is not fun at all. I'll bring you to the flower fairies' garden, there will definitely be something you like there. The flower fairies have never had guests before, so everyone will definitely welcome you. Chu Tian's heart slightly skipped a beat. The flower fairies were famous for their divine planting skills. This flower fairy's garden was definitely a treasure trove that normal people would not have a chance to touch. Since Chu Tian had this chance, how could he give it up? The depression of not being able to trick the Traians was swept away. All right. Chu Tian said with a nod, then let's go to the flower fairy's place. Lulu revealed a smile and quickly circled around twice. She immediately flapped her wings to lead the way. The elven tribe, the Traiant forest, and the flower fairy's garden, these three places formed a triangle, but there was a large empty space in the center. Chu Tian asked in a curious voice, why is there a forest between the three races that no one lives in? Lulu slowed down and stuck close to Chu Tian as she said, you must be talking about the Lost Forest. No one is allowed to enter that place because although the Lost Forest is not big, there are often illusions in the forest. Once an animal is trapped in an illusion, they will be completely lost and will never be able to come out. There's actually this kind of thing. Chu Tian was suddenly a bit excited. Are there ancient ruins or secret realms in the forest? That's not it. Lulu shook her head and said, this is because there is a special ore hidden in the Lost Forest. This ore can directly affect one's mind, so people can't escape from the illusion. Geological reason. He was happy for nothing. But then again, this was a material that could directly affect one's mind, so this meant that it was a spiritual attributed material. Even a powerful creature like the elves would be affected by this ore, which meant that the energy contained in this ore was very strong. Lulu saw Chu Tian pondering and couldn't help asking, what are you thinking about? Oh, nothing much. You also know that I am a scholar. As a scholar, I have a strong desire to explore and learn. Chu Tian rubbed his chin and said, when I heard you talk about the special scene in the Lost Forest, I couldn't help being a bit curious. What kind of material could cause this kind of disturbance? So it's like this. Lulu thought for a few seconds and said, then I'll bring you in to take a look. Isn't this a forbidden area? It doesn't matter, the flower fairies have different physiques, so they can resist the illusion. Lulu often goes in to collect nectar, so there won't be any safety issues. Chapter 765. The lush foliage of the forest cut the sunlight to pieces. Several big-eared monsters were carrying herbs and oars on their backs, happily rushing towards Oldman Town. The big-eared monsters were a common race in the forest. They had green skin like the orcs, were short, weak, and stupid, and mainly ate vegetarian food. Although they had very sharp hearing, they were naturally very timid, so they were the lowest-ranked race in the forest. They couldn't even compare to the low-level spirit beasts like the mouse and rabbit races, so they were always bullied by other races. This made the big-eared monsters not dare come into contact with other races, so they could only steal things like stealing things, stealing medicine fields, and etc. But recently the big-eared monsters were very happy. This was the 4th time they were on the road to Oldman Small Town. In Oldman Small Town's fair and safe trading environment, even a weak race like them would not be bullied by others. Now they could bravely take out their treasures to exchange for urgently needed items. What should they exchange for today? Canned food? Weapons? The big-eared monsters were arguing with each other as they walked. Who knew what sound their sharp hearing would catch at this time? When the big-eared monsters looked over, they were instantly scared out of their wits. With a scream, they turned to run. In Oldman Small Town's canyon, there were beautiful and elegant snow-white unicorns that were currently surrounding Oldman Small Town. These demon beasts were like white jade sculptures, their bodies were filled with a strong and explosive beauty. They were simply like works of art, truly worthy of being spirit beasts that often appeared in literature and poetry. Unicorns were high-level demon beasts with intelligence, and their strength could be seen on their horns. In a normal situation, a normal white horn was equivalent to a level 2 demon beast. If it had a silver horn, it would be equivalent to a level 3 demon beast. If it had a crystal clear light gold horn, it would be equivalent to a level 4 unicorn king. Around 3,000 white unicorns were neatly surrounding Oldman Small Town. There was a large number of them, it could be called a unicorn army. Other than that, there was an elf holding a bow sitting on the back of each unicorn, staring at Oldman Small Town like a tiger watching its prey. Those big-eared monsters that were scared away. Not a single elf would care. When the elves came here, it was unknown how many gnomes, goblins, and Bigfoot monsters were scared away, but it also alarmed the ogres and high-level spirit beasts. But the scale of the unicorn army was too big. Even if they didn't run away in fear, they wouldn't dare do anything to the elves. Everyone was confused. In the edge of the forest of chaos, why would there be so many elves? The elves were one of the main powers in the Forest of Chaos, and they didn't like dealing with other races, so they would never attack other locals for no reason. What was going on this time? Grandfather. A young elf around 14 or 15 years old, wearing green wooden armor and holding a thin spear, was asking an older elf for permission to fight. We've received accurate information. Little Princess Vivian has been kidnapped here. Let's kill our way in and rescue the little princess. This elderly elf didn't appear to be as old as his seniority. There weren't many wrinkles on his face, but his eyebrows and hair were grayish-white. His aura was steady and deep. Although he was riding on an ordinary unicorn, his temperament was especially outstanding among the many elves. The little princess was kidnapped. Who in this world could kidnap her? The elven great elder didn't need a brain to guess what had happened. The elves were not a race that liked fighting, so there was no need to kill. This small town was just a peripheral force. In the eyes of the elves, it couldn't cause any trouble. They might as well capture the little princess first and then properly investigate the matter. Greyheart, don't be reckless. The little princess is rebellious. Do you want her to run away again? The elven great elder knew Vivian's character very well. To deal with this little princess, he could only guide her slowly and not use violence. Therefore, he ordered, go to the small town in front and report. If you don't want innocent people to be hurt for no reason, then immediately send Princess Vivian out. The elves are a civilized race with a long history. If they can avoid using violence to solve their problems, then they should. I believe that the kind little Princess Vivian also doesn't want to see innocent people hurt because of her. The elves immediately went to report. The elven youth Greyheart was a bit aggrieved. This is just a small tribe on the edge of the forest. We are noble and powerful elves, why should we be polite to these lowly forest races? Everything exists for a reason, we can't kill people just because they are lowly. The Great Elder seemed to accept that humans and spirit beasts were low-level races, just like ants and beetles. He proudly said, "It is because we live among these lowly, ugly, and dirty races that the elves are more elegant and noble. So, we can't easily destroy the traditions of the elves, this is the biggest difference between us and the races of the continent." Greyheart's mouth fell open. "Don't say any more." The Great Elder cut him off. "We are only investigating the matter of Aubersen's immortal herb being stolen and Princess Vivian running away from the tribe. We won't involve anything unrelated." Vivian, Chu Tian, and Meng Yingying came out. "This is bad." Vivian saw the elven elder sitting on the unicorn in the distance and her expression instantly changed. "This is the Tree of Life tribe's Great Elder." Vivian had been staying in the Tree of Life tribe before she ran away. The Tree of Life tribe was not an important place for the elves, it couldn't even be considered an elven city. However, the location of this tribe was said to be the origin of the elves, the ancient ancestral land of the wood elves. So, although it was not flourishing or strong, according to the traditions of the elves, each elf needed to live in the ancestral land for a period of time, receiving teachings and learning the rules of the tribe. Once they reached adulthood, they would be sent to various tribes. This period of time was very important to each elf. Vivian was the Elven King's youngest daughter, but she actually ran away from the ancestral land and stole the tribe's elder's immortal medicine. This matter naturally caused a large stir, so it created a very bad influence in the elves. Greyheart revealed a look of joy when he saw Princess Vivian. "The princess has left the tribe for 2 months and almost the entire elven race is looking for you. I think it must be a despicable human who tricked the princess, that's why something like this happened. As long as we heavily punish the lowly human, perhaps the princess' punishment will be reduced a bit." "Don't speak nonsense. The matter of stealing the medicine was done by me, running away from home was also done by me. It was all my idea, it has nothing to do with anyone else." Vivian showed no fear or remorse. "I am already a member of Miracle Commerce, I won't go back with you. Go back and tell Royal Father and the Council's old men that I have already grasped the technology to change the elves' fate. When I go back, I will definitely benefit the entire race." Greyheart's expression changed. The little princess had really been tricked by the humans. Otherwise how could she say this kind of nonsense? Damn, these sly and hypocritical humans, they like to trick the pure elves the most. The most unforgivable thing was that even the elven race's Pearl, Princess Vivian, had been tricked. This was even more of a crime. Vivian claimed to be a member of some company and was actually willing to work with humans. This was simply blasphemy against the elves and a large violation of the elven race's rules. No. This was already not just violating the rules. This was basically rebelling against the elven race. The elven Great Elder's face sunk. If this matter became big, Vivian would be imprisoned for at least 100 years. It was imprisonment, not house arrest. Even Vivian would not be able to escape from the elven race's imprisonment. This was a very severe punishment for the elves with long lifespans. Chu Tian saw that something was wrong and immediately stood up to say, "Fellow elven friends, you've misunderstood. Vivian took the medicine to save me, but regarding this matter, I have already." "Shut up. You're a human traitor." Greyheart's wooden spear stabbed into the ground and Chu Tian felt countless vines come out from his body, wrapping around him like giant pythons. Greyheart's figure moved and he stabbed out with his spear like a meteor. Greyheart looked like a 13 to 14-year-old boy, but in human terms, he would be over 60 years old. he was only 1 year younger than Vivian. The elf's mental growth was quite slow, but elves at this age weren't weak at all. Not to mention that he was the grandson of the Greyheart tribe's great elder, his cultivation had reached the first true spirit layer. Vivian wanted to stop him when she saw this. She was very familiar with Greyheart's methods, and with her strength and innate spatial energy, it was very easy for her to subdue Greyheart. But before Vivian could make a move, the Elven Great Elder's talisman fell onto Vivian and instantly sealed Vivian's source spirit. This is bad. She couldn't use her spatial energy. Greyheart's spear stabbed at Chu Tian. Chu Tian's face sunk. Damn, this group of pedantic and stupid elves, they clearly picked up a large bargain, but they still want to kill Father. But, if Father died here this easily, then he would have lived 2 lives in vain. The demon god's sword source spirit soared into the sky. That destructive might that looked down on all living beings instantly tore apart the vines binding him. Chu Tian directly activated the second state of the flame demon transformation, and with the endless might of the demon god's sword, he slashed at Greyheart. 8th awakened soul layer against the first true spirit layer. There was no suspense at all. Chu Tian's flame demon transformation could increase his strength by 1 layer at most, but the demon god's sword source spirit's amplification could allow him to kill a peak 9th true spirit layer expert. Even if he faced a cultivator in the first true spirit layer, he wouldn't lose. Dong! The 2 powers collided. Both sides were sent flying back at the same time. Chu Tian was at a slight disadvantage, but Greyheart's wooden spear had already been ignited by the netherworld ghost flame. Such an evil power. Greyheart was secretly shocked. Princess Vivian, with your noble status and bloodline, how can you be together with these lowly races who are famous for their hypocrisy and despicableness? Moreover, they are people who practice evil arts and have evil intentions. I think he wants to use your status to deal with the elves. This accusation was becoming bigger and bigger. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.